Fake HOA cops trashed a single mom's lemonade stand. Her daughter's a tech genius. This lemonade stand belongs to Maria Gonzalez, a single mom in Florida who set it up to help pay for her daughter Sophia's school fees. But a group of fake HOA cops showed up, called it a commercial violation, and trashed it, making Sophia cry in front of her customers. They didn't know Sophia is a 14-year-old tech genius who'd hack their entire operation and bring them down. This is HOA Karen Files, where we expose the bullies who target the innocent. Ever had a fake HOA ruin something special? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more. Let's dive into how Maria and Sophia turned the tables on these scammers. Maria Gonzalez, 40, lived in a small, sun-bleached house in a suburban neighborhood in Orlando, Florida. The house was modest, peeling paint, a leaky roof, and a front yard that was more weeds than grass. But Maria had made it a home for herself and her 14-year-old daughter, Sophia. Maria was a single mom, working long hours as a cashier at a local grocery store to make ends meet. Money was tight, especially with Sophia's school fees piling up. Sophia was a bright student, excelling in math and science, and Maria dreamed of sending her to a STEM-focused high school next year. But the tuition was steep, and Maria was determined to find a way. One Saturday morning, Sophia came up with an idea. "Mom, let's set up a lemonade stand," she said, her eyes sparkling. "I can make the lemonade, and we can sell it to the neighbors. It'll be fun, and we can save the money for school." Maria smiled, her heart swelling with pride. Sophia had always been resourceful, a trait she'd inherited from her late father, who'd passed away when Sophia was just 5. "Let's do it," Maria said, hugging her daughter. They spent the morning mixing lemonade, fresh lemons, sugar, and a splash of mint from their tiny backyard garden. Sophia painted a sign that read "Sophia's Lemonade," $1 in bright yellow letters, decorating it with little lemon drawings. By noon, the lemonade stand was set up on the front lawn, a folding table covered with a checkered tablecloth, a pitcher of lemonade, and a stack of plastic cups. Sophia sat behind the table, her smile wide as she waved at passing neighbors. The stand was a hit. Kids on bikes stopped by, parents walking their dogs bought cups, and even the mailman, Mr. Thompson, dropped $1 in the jar. "This is the best lemonade I've ever had," he said, winking at Sophia. By the end of the day, they'd made $30, and Sophia was already planning to add cookies to the menu next time. "We're gonna make it, Mom," she said, hugging Maria tightly. "I know we will." The next weekend, the stand was even busier. Word had spread, and neighbors brought their friends, turning the lawn into a little community gathering spot. Sophia added a tip jar with a sign that read, "Saving for School," and people were generous, some dropping $5 bills for a single cup. Maria watched from the porch, her heart full. She thought about how proud Sophia's dad would be, seeing their little girl shine. But the joy didn't last long. Around 2 p.m., a gray sedan pulled up to the curb, and 3 people stepped out, 2 men and a woman, all wearing black vests with HOA compliance in bold white letters. The woman, who introduced herself as Karen Ellis, carried a clipboard and a camera, snapping photos of the stand without asking. "This is an illegal commercial operation," she said, her voice sharp. "You're in violation of Sunview HOA regulations. You need to shut this down immediately or pay a $1,500 fine." Maria stood up, her brow furrowed. "Sunview HOA? I've lived here 10 years. There's no HOA in this neighborhood. This is just a lemonade stand for my daughter's school fees." Karen smirked, handing Maria a letter stamped with a fake logo. "Sunview HOA was established last year," she said. "You're under our jurisdiction now. Pay the fine, or we'll have this stand removed." Sophia, who'd been pouring a cup for a customer, froze. "Mom, what's happening?" she asked, her voice small. Maria put a hand on her shoulder, trying to stay calm. "It's okay, Mija," she said. "They're mistaken." But Karen wasn't backing down. One of the men, a tall guy named Derek, stepped forward and kicked the table, sending the pitcher of lemonade crashing to the ground. The liquid splashed across the grass, soaking Sophia's sign. The other man, whose name tag read Steve, grabbed a handful of cups and crumpled them, tossing them into the yard. "You heard her," Derek said, his voice cold. "Shut it down, or we'll be back with the cops." Sophia burst into tears, her small frame shaking as she watched her hard work get destroyed. The neighbors who'd been buying lemonade gasped, some stepping forward to help, but Karen raised a hand. "Stay out of this," she snapped. "This is HOA business." Maria pulled Sophia into her arms, her own eyes burning with tears. "Get off my property," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You're scaring my daughter." Karen laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Pay the fine, or we'll make things worse," she said, before the group got back in their sedan and drove off. That evening, Maria and Sophia sat on the couch, the broken sign on the coffee table in front of them. Sophia was still crying, her face buried in Maria's shoulder. "I just wanted to help, Mom," she said, her voice muffled. "Why did they do that?" Maria stroked her hair, her heart breaking. "I don't know, Mija," she said. "But we're not giving up." Sophia looked up, her eyes red but determined. "I can find out who they are," she said. "I'm good with computers, Mom. I can make them pay for this." Maria hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, baby," she said. "Let's fight back, together." Sophia wasn't just a bright student. She was a tech prodigy. At 12, she'd won a national coding competition, building an app that helped kids with dyslexia learn to read. At 13, she'd taught herself ethical hacking, using her skills to help her school secure its website after a cyber attack. Now, at 14, she was determined to use those skills to protect her mom and get justice for their lemonade stand. "They messed with the wrong girl," Sophia said, her voice steady as she opened her laptop in her small bedroom, the walls covered with STEM awards and a poster of Ada Lovelace. Maria watched, a mix of pride and worry on her face. "Are you sure this is safe, Mija?" she asked. Sophia nodded, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I'm not breaking any laws, Mom," she said. "I'm just looking for information." She started with the letter Karen had given them. The logo, Sunview HOA, looked official, but Sophia noticed the email address at the bottom. compliance@sunviewho.org, mailtocompliance@sunviewho.org. She ran a quick WHOS lookup on the domain, finding it was registered just 6 months ago to a company called Apex Property Solutions, with a P.O. box in Miami. "Fake," Sophia muttered, jotting down the name. Next, Sophia used a simple phishing technique, not to steal data, but to gather intel. She created a fake email account posing as a concerned resident and sent a message to the Sunview HOA email, asking for more information about the fines. Within an hour, she got a reply with a link to a payment portal. "Bingo," Sophia said, her eyes lighting up. The portal was poorly secured, and Sophia easily accessed its backend, finding a database of violations and fines for dozens of homeowners in the area. Maria's name was on the list, along with notes: single mom, easy target, pressure to pay or evict. Sophia's stomach churned. "They're targeting people like us on purpose," she said, showing Maria the screen. "They think we won't fight back." Sophia dug deeper, tracing Apex Property Solutions to a man named Roger Tate, a 45-year-old with a history of fraud convictions. She found his name on a shady forum where scammers shared tips on HOA enforcement scams. Roger had bragged about his operation, saying, "Seniors and single parents are the best marks. They're too scared to fight." Sophia's hands clenched into fists. "He's going down," she said, her voice fierce. She downloaded the entire database, including email chains between Roger and his team, Karen, Derek, and Steve, detailing their plans to extort money and force homeowners to sell. Maria, meanwhile, reached out to the neighbors for support. She knocked on doors, explaining what had happened and asking if anyone else had been targeted by Sunview HOA. Several had received similar letters. One neighbor, a 60-year-old named Mrs. Carter, had paid $500 to avoid a fine for her dog's barking. "I thought it was real," Mrs. Carter said, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to lose my home." Maria's resolve hardened. "We're stopping them," she said. "Sophia's working on it, and we'll get the police involved." Sophia sent the database to a family friend, Officer Lopez, who worked in the Orlando Police Department's cybercrime unit. "This is big, Sophia," Lopez said, scrolling through the files. "You've got enough here to put these guys away for years. But we need to catch them in the act to make the charges stick." Sophia nodded, a plan forming in her mind. "They said they'd be back if we didn't pay," she said. "Let's set up a trap." Lopez agreed, promising to have a team on standby for when the fake HOA cops returned. The next day, Maria and Sophia rebuilt the lemonade stand, this time with a hidden camera taped under the table. Sophia added a sign that read, "Lemonade Stand Reopening. Come support us," and posted about it on the neighborhood's Facebook group. The neighbors showed up in droves, determined to support Maria and Sophia after hearing about the incident. By noon, the lawn was packed with customers, kids laughing as they sipped lemonade, and adults dropping extra money in the tip jar. Sophia watched from the stand, her laptop open on her lap, ready to record everything. Sure enough, the gray sedan pulled up. Karen, Derek, and Steve stepped out, their vests on, their faces smug. Karen marched over, her voice loud. "You were warned," she shouted, pointing at the stand. "This is your last chance. Pay the $1,500, or we're tearing this down." Derek grabbed the pitcher of lemonade and poured it onto the grass, while Steve kicked the table, snapping one of its legs. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she kept the camera rolling. "You're on video," she said, her voice steady. "And I know you're not a real HOA. I've got your emails, your database, everything." Karen's face paled, but she tried to bluff. "You're just a kid," she sneered. "You don't scare me." That's when Officer Lopez and his team moved in, sirens blaring as they surrounded the sedan. "Orlando PD." Lopez shouted, his badge out. "You're under arrest for extortion, vandalism, and fraud." The crowd cheered as Karen, Derek, and Steve were handcuffed, their smug expressions replaced with panic. Sophia hugged Maria, her tears now ones of relief. "We did it, Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "We stopped them." Maria kissed her forehead, her heart full. "You're amazing, Mija," she said. "I'm so proud of you." With Karen, Derek, and Steve in custody, Officer Lopez and his team dove into the database Sophia had uncovered. The evidence was damning. Apex Property Solutions had targeted over 50 homeowners in the Orlando area, extorting more than $20,000 in fake fines over the past year. The operation was led by Roger Tate, who'd set up Apex as a front to pressure homeowners into paying or selling their properties to a shady developer, Sunshine Realty Partners. The developer would then flip the land for a profit, splitting the proceeds with Roger. Sophia's hack had blown the case wide open, but she wasn't done. She worked with Lopez to trace Roger's digital footprint, finding a hidden server where he stored backups of his operation, more email chains, financial records, and even a list of future targets. "This guy's been at it for years," Lopez said, scrolling through the files. "He's got operations in 3 other states, Georgia, Arizona, and North Carolina." Sophia's eyes widened. "We have to stop him," she said. "He can't keep hurting people like he hurt us." Lopez nodded, promising to coordinate with the FBI to take down the entire network. Maria, meanwhile, became a local hero. The neighbors who'd supported the lemonade stand spread the word, and soon, the story was picked up by local news outlets like WESH 2. A reporter named Carla interviewed Maria and Sophia on their front lawn, the lemonade stand rebuilt and bustling with customers. "These fake HOA cops thought they could bully us," Maria said, her voice steady. "But my daughter showed them what we're made of." Sophia blushed as Carla praised her tech skills. "I just wanted to help my mom," she said, holding up her laptop. "I didn't want anyone else to go through what we did." The news segment went viral, racking up millions of views on YouTube and sparking a wave of support. People across the country sent letters and donations to help with Sophia's school fees, with one tech company, CodeBright, offering to pay her tuition in full. "We need more girls like Sophia in STEM," the CEO said in a statement. "She's a role model for the next generation." Sophia was overwhelmed, tears in her eyes as she read the messages. "I can't believe it, Mom," she said. "They're paying for my school." Maria hugged her tightly, her heart full. "You deserve it, Mija," she said. "You're going to do amazing things." The community rallied around Maria and Sophia, organizing a lemonade day where every kid in the neighborhood set up their own stand, donating the proceeds to a local charity for single parents. The event raised $5,000, and Maria used some of the money to fix up the house, new paint, a new roof, and a proper lawn for the lemonade stand. "This is our home," she told Sophia, standing on the freshly mowed grass. "And no one's taking it from us." Sophia smiled, her laptop tucked under her arm. "Not with me around," she said, her voice full of confidence. Back at the police station, Lopez and his team were closing in on Roger Tate. Using Sophia's evidence, they tracked him to a condo in Miami, where he was arrested on charges of racketeering, fraud, and cybercrime. The FBI took over the case, dismantling Apex Property Solutions and seizing its assets. Sunshine Realty Partners was hit with a $2 million fine, with the money distributed to the victims. Maria and Sophia received $10,000, which Maria put into a college fund for Sophia. "You're going to change the world," she told her daughter, kissing her forehead. "I know you will." The arrests of Roger Tate and his crew made national headlines, with outlets like CNN and NBC News covering the story. The headline, "Teen Tech Genius Takes Down Fake HOA Scam," captured the public's imagination, and Sophia became an overnight sensation. Social media exploded with hashtags like #JusticeForSophia and #LemonadeStandHeroes, as people shared their own stories of HOA scams and praised Sophia's bravery. A viral TikTok video of the lemonade stand reopening, set to triumphant music, racked up 5 million views, with comments like "Sophia is a legend," and "Don't mess with a girl and her laptop." Sophia's story caught the attention of tech giants, with companies like Google and Microsoft reaching out to offer her internships when she turned 16. CodeBright, the company that had paid her tuition, invited her to speak at their annual conference in Silicon Valley. "I'm just a kid from Orlando," Sophia said in her speech, her voice trembling with nerves. "But if I can stop a scam and help my mom, anyone can make a difference." The audience gave her a standing ovation, and Sophia's face lit up with a shy smile. Maria watched from the front row, tears in her eyes. "That's my girl," she whispered, her heart bursting with pride. Back in Orlando, the community continued to support Maria and Sophia. The Lemonade Day event became an annual tradition, with dozens of kids setting up stands to raise money for local charities. Maria and Sophia's stand was the centerpiece, now a permanent fixture on their lawn with a new sign that read "Sophia's Lemonade," a stand for justice. Neighbors stopped by regularly, not just for lemonade but to chat, turning the lawn into a gathering spot for the community. "You've brought us together," Mrs. Carter told Maria, sipping a cup of lemonade. "We were strangers before this." The legal fallout from the case was significant. Roger Tate was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with Karen, Derek, and Steve each receiving 5 years for their roles in the scam. The FBI's investigation uncovered similar operations in 3 other states, leading to dozens of arrests and the shutdown of multiple fake HOA networks. Lawmakers in Florida introduced a bill called Sophia's Law, making it a felony to impersonate an HOA with intent to defraud, with a focus on protecting vulnerable populations like single parents and seniors. Sophia Gonzalez showed us what's at stake, a state senator said at a press conference, holding up a photo of Sophia at her lemonade stand. "We're fighting for every lemonade stand out there." Maria and Sophia used their share of the settlement to take a small vacation, their first in years, to Disney World, a dream Sophia had since she was little. They laughed on the rides, ate Mickey-shaped ice cream, and took a photo in front of Cinderella's castle, their smiles brighter than ever. "We did it, Mija," Maria said, hugging Sophia tightly. "We made it through." Sophia nodded, her eyes shining. "And we helped other people, too," she said. "That's what matters." The lemonade stand continued to thrive, with Sophia adding new flavors, strawberry, mango, and even a tech punch she named after her laptop. She started a blog about her experience, sharing tips on coding and cybersecurity for kids, which quickly gained a following. "I want to help other girls get into tech," she told Maria one evening, her laptop open on the kitchen table. "If I can do it, they can too." Maria smiled, her heart full. "You're already helping, Mija," she said. "You're my hero." In the years that followed, Sophia's story became a beacon of hope for kids everywhere. Her blog grew into a full-fledged platform, with thousands of followers learning to code through her tutorials. She was invited to speak at schools across Florida, sharing her story and encouraging girls to pursue STEM. "Don't let anyone tell you you can't do it," she told a group of middle schoolers, holding up her laptop. "I took down a scam with this. You can do anything." The kids cheered, inspired by the girl who'd turned a lemonade stand into a movement. Maria's life changed, too. With Sophia's tuition covered and the settlement money providing a safety net, she was able to cut back on her hours at the grocery store and start a small catering business, specializing in lemonade and baked goods. The business took off, with Maria catering events across Orlando, often with Sophia by her side, pouring lemonade and chatting with customers. "This all started with you," Maria told Sophia one day, as they set up for a local festival. "You made this possible." Sophia smiled, her braces glinting in the sun. "We did it together, Mom," she said. The community around their house became a tight-knit family, with neighbors looking out for each other and supporting local causes. The annual Lemonade Day grew bigger each year, raising thousands for charities that helped single parents and kids in need. Sophia donated a portion of her blog's earnings to the event, ensuring it would continue to make a difference. "This is our way of giving back," she told Maria, handing out cups at the stand. "Just like you taught me." Maria nodded, her eyes misty. "Your dad would be so proud," she said, her voice soft. Sophia's law passed in Florida with bipartisan support, and similar laws were proposed in other states, including Texas and California. Advocacy groups for single parents used Sophia's story to raise awareness about scams, distributing flyers with tips on how to spot fake HOAs and protect property rights. Sophia Gonzalez showed us the power of one voice, an advocate said at a rally, holding up a photo of Sophia at her stand. "She's a reminder that even the smallest stand can make a big difference." For Maria and Sophia, the greatest reward was their bond. On the third anniversary of the incident, they held a special event at the lemonade stand, inviting the neighbors, Officer Lopez, and even Carla from Wesh 2. They unveiled a new sign for the stand, a gift from the community, that read "Sophia's Lemonade, where heroes are made." The crowd cheered as Sophia cut the ribbon, her smile brighter than ever. "This stand isn't just about lemonade," she said, her voice clear. "It's about fighting for what's right and never giving up." Maria stood beside her, tears in her eyes, knowing they'd turned a moment of pain into a legacy of hope. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the lawn, Maria and Sophia sat on the porch, sipping lemonade and watching the neighbors laugh and chat. "We did good, Mija," Maria said, her hand on Sophia's. Sophia nodded, her laptop on her lap, already working on her next coding project. "We're just getting started, Mom," she said, her eyes shining with determination. The lemonade stand stood proudly in the yard, a symbol of resilience, love, and the power of a girl who refused to let bullies win. Maria and Sophia turned a lemonade stand into a symbol of justice, taking down a group of fake HOA cops who thought they could bully a single mom and her daughter. They didn't know Sophia was a tech genius who'd hack their entire operation and bring them to their knees. Now, their story is inspiring kids everywhere to stand up and fight back. This is HOA Karen Files, where we shine a light on the heroes who refuse to back down. Have you or someone you know been targeted by a fake HOA? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next story. We'll see you soon, and let's keep standing up for what's right. Welcome to Santa Cruz, California, where this little studio in a modest backyard became the battleground for a fight against injustice. This is the creative haven of Elise Harper, a 29-year-old artist who turned her lifelong passion for painting into a thriving career, live streaming her art sessions to over 500,000 followers on TikTok. Her fans don't just watch her paint. They've become a family, a community that shares her love for creativity and beauty. But on a quiet August evening, a group of fake HOA cops stormed in, labeled her beloved studio an unapproved structure, and demanded she tear it down, or pay a crippling $4,000 fine. They didn't stop there. They smashed her artwork, spilled her paints, and tried to crush her spirit. What they didn't know was that Elise is more than just an artist. She's a social media star with an army of loyal fans who'd rally to her side in a heartbeat. This is HOA Karen Files, where we expose the bullies who target dreamers, the ones who think they can tear down someone's passion without a fight. Have you ever had a fake HOA, or any bully, threaten something you love? Maybe it was a garden, a small business, or a creative space like Elise's. I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below, because I read every single one. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss an episode of HOA Karen Files. We're diving deep into how Elise turned this attack into a movement, using her art and her community to fight back against these scammers. Let's get started, because this story is about more than a studio. It's about the power of creativity and the strength of a community that refuses to let a dreamer fall. Elise Harper, a 29-year-old artist with a quiet intensity, lived in a small rental house on the edge of Santa Cruz, California, a coastal town known for its laid-back vibe and artistic community. The house was a far cry from the glossy beachfront properties that dotted the area. Its faded yellow paint peeled in strips, the front porch sagged under years of neglect, and the kitchen still sported avocado green cabinets straight out of the 1970s. Elise didn't care about the house's imperfections. She hadn't chosen it for its charm. What drew her to the property was the backyard, a sprawling, overgrown space with a rickety old shed that she'd transformed into her dream studio. The shed had been a mess when Elise first moved in 3 years ago, its roof leaking, its walls covered in cobwebs, and the floor littered with rusty nails and broken glass. But Elise saw potential where others saw junk. She spent months fixing it up, using every spare dollar from her barista job to buy supplies. She patched the roof with shingles she found on clearance, painted the walls a soft cream to reflect the light, and installed a large window to let in the golden California sun. She sanded the floor by hand, her knees aching as she worked late into the night, and added a skylight to watch the stars while she painted. By the time she was done, the shed was unrecognizable, a bright, airy studio filled with the tools of her trade. Easels, canvases, jars of brushes, and shelves lined with tubes of paint in every color imaginable. The walls were a gallery of her work, vibrant landscapes of the Santa Cruz coastline, abstract portraits with bold strokes of color, and dreamy seascapes that seemed to shimmer with light. To Elise, the studio wasn't just a place to work. It was her sanctuary, a space where she could escape the chaos of the world and lose herself in her art. Elise had always been an artist, ever since she was a child growing up in a small apartment in Oakland. Her mother, a single parent who worked as a nurse, couldn't afford art lessons, but she'd buy Elise cheap watercolor sets and sketch pads whenever she could. Elise would spend hours in her tiny bedroom, painting imaginary worlds where she could be anyone, go anywhere. Art became her refuge during tough times, when her mom worked double shifts, when bullies at school teased her for her hand-me-down clothes, when she felt like she didn't belong. "You've got a gift, Mija," her mom would say, pinning Elise's drawings to the fridge. "Don't ever stop." Elise never did. She studied art in community college, working nights at a diner to pay tuition, but the dream of making a living as an artist always fell out of reach, until TikTok changed everything. 2 years ago, on a whim, Elise had set up her phone to livestream a painting session. She'd been working on a sunset seascape, the kind of piece that made her heart sing. Golden light melting into the ocean, streaks of pink and orange blazing across the sky. She didn't expect anyone to watch. She just wanted to share her process with a few friends. But something about the video resonated. Maybe it was Elise's soothing voice as she narrated her brush strokes, or the way the colors came alive on the canvas, or the quiet authenticity she exuded. A young woman in a messy studio, pouring her soul into her work. Whatever it was, the video took off, gaining 100,000 views overnight. Comments poured in. "This is so relaxing. You're incredible. Please do more." Elise was stunned, her hands trembling as she read the messages. For the first time, she felt seen. She started live streaming regularly, setting up her phone on a tripod in the corner of the studio. Her audience grew steadily, drawn to her talent and her warmth. Elise wasn't just an artist. She was a storyteller, weaving tales about her life as she painted. The time she got caught in a rainstorm on the beach while sketching, the stray cat she'd adopted and named Picasso, the way the ocean made her feel alive. Her videos became a mix of art tutorial and ASMR, the sound of her brush against the canvas a soothing rhythm for viewers around the world. Within a year, she had 500,000 followers, and her income from sponsorships, art sales, and livestream donations allowed her to quit her barista job. "I can't believe this is my life," she'd say on her streams, her hazel eyes shining. "I get to paint every day, and I get to share it with all of you. This studio, it's my everything." On a warm August evening, Elise was in her element, live streaming to an audience of 10,000 viewers. She was working on a large canvas, a stormy ocean scene that had been brewing in her mind for weeks. The painting was ambitious, dark, churning waves under a sky heavy with gray clouds, flashes of lightning illuminating the horizon. This piece is about chaos and survival, she told her viewers, dipping her brush into a mix of cobalt blue and white. I saw a storm like this last year on the coast. It was terrifying, but so beautiful. Let's add some waves here. She was so focused that she didn't hear the car pull up outside, its tires crunching on the gravel driveway. The studio door burst open with a bang, the sound echoing through the small space and making Elise jump. Her brush slipped, leaving a jagged streak of blue across the canvas, ruining the wave she'd been perfecting. 3 people stood in the doorway, their silhouettes framed against the fading light of the evening. They were dressed in matching black vests with HOA enforcement in bold white letters across the chest. The woman in the lead, who introduced herself as Janet Reed, was in her late 40s, with sharp features and a pinched expression that suggested she rarely smiled. She carried a clipboard in one hand and a camera in the other, immediately snapping photos of the studio without asking permission. Her voice was cold, clipped as she spoke. This structure is in violation of Coastal Pines HOA regulations, she said, her eyes scanning the room with disdain. It's unapproved, and our records show you're using it for commercial purposes. You need to dismantle it within 48 hours or pay a $4,000 fine. Elise blinked, her mind struggling to process what was happening. Her heart pounded in her chest, a mix of confusion and fear tightening her throat. Coastal Pines HOA, she said, her voice shaky but firm. I've lived here for 3 years. There's no HOA in this area. My landlord would have told me. This is my studio. I'm an artist. I live stream my painting sessions, but it's not a business in the way you're saying. Janet smirked, her lips curling in a way that made Elise's stomach twist. She handed Elise a letter, the paper stamped with a logo that looked official but somehow off, like something designed in a rush. Coastal Pines HOA was established last year, Janet said, her tone dripping with condescension. You're under our jurisdiction now. You should have received our notices. Pay the fine, or we'll have this shed torn down, and you'll be responsible for the demolition costs. Before Elise could respond, one of the men, a burly guy in his 30s with a name tag that read Tony, stepped forward. His movements were aggressive, his broad shoulders filling the doorway as he grabbed the canvas Elise had been working on, the stormy ocean she'd poured her heart into. This is just junk, he sneered, his voice gruff. Without a second thought, he snapped the canvas in half over his knee, the wood splintering with a sickening crack. The paint smeared across the torn fabric, the lightning-streaked sky now a crumpled mess on the floor. Elise gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. The other man, whose name tag read Nick, started knocking over paint cans, the colors spilling across the studio floor in a chaotic rainbow, vermilion red, ultramarine blue, and cadmium yellow pooling together in a heartbreaking mess. Elise's live stream was still running, the camera capturing every moment of the chaos. Her viewers, who'd been chatting happily in the comments moments before, watched in horror as the scene unfolded. The chat exploded with reactions. What's happening? They broke her painting. This is awful. Call the police. Elise, are you okay? Elise's hands shook as she grabbed her phone from the tripod, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. You're on camera, she said, pointing the phone at Janet, Tony, and Nick. I'm live streaming this to thousands of people right now. Get out of my studio now. Her voice cracked on the last word, but there was a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Janet laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that sent a chill down Elise's spine. You've got 48 hours, she said, her gaze cold and unyielding. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. She motioned to Tony and Nick, and the group turned to leave, slamming the door behind them. The sound reverberated through the studio, a final punctuation to their destruction. Elise sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the ruined canvas and the spilled paint. Her sanctuary, the space she'd built with her own hands, felt violated. But even in her despair, a spark of defiance flickered inside her. She thought about her followers, the community that had given her a career, a purpose. They picked the wrong artist to mess with, she whispered to herself, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. She turned back to her phone, the live stream still active, her viewers flooding the comments with support. "I'm okay, guys," she said, her voice hoarse but determined. "But I need your help. These people, they're trying to take my studio, my dream. I'm not going to let them. Will you help me fight back?" The comments lit up with affirmations. "We've got your back, Elise. Those jerks are going down. You're not alone." Elise took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She saved the livestream footage, knowing it could be evidence, and posted a clip of the incident to her TikTok with a caption. "Fake HOA cops just trashed my studio. They think they can shut me down, but I need your help to fight back." Hashtag Save Elise's Studio. The video spread like wildfire, gaining 2 million views overnight and igniting a firestorm of support. Elise knew she had a powerful weapon, her community, and she was ready to use it to protect the space that meant everything to her. Elise barely slept that night, her mind racing with a mix of fear, anger, and determination. She sat on the floor of her studio until the early hours, cleaning up the spilled paint with a rag, the sharp scent of turpentine filling the air. The broken canvas lay in the corner, a painful reminder of the violation she'd endured. Every creak of the house made her jump, her nerves frayed as she replayed the confrontation in her head. Janet's cold smirk, Tony's aggressive stance, the sound of her canvas snapping in two. But even in her exhaustion, she felt a growing resolve. She wasn't going to let these people take her studio, not without a fight. When she finally checked her phone at dawn, she was stunned. Her TikTok video had exploded, gaining over 2 million views in just 12 hours. It had been shared across platforms: Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, even Facebook groups for artists and small business owners. Hashtags like hashtag Save Elise's Studio and hashtag Fake HOA Cops were trending, with thousands of people commenting, sharing, and reposting. Her inbox was flooded with messages from followers around the world, their words a lifeline in her darkest moment. "This is so wrong. What can we do to help?" wrote a fan from London. "I'm an artist too. I'd be devastated if this happened to me." "We're with you, Elise," said another from Texas. A group of art students from Chicago started a petition to protect Elise's studio, which gained 5,000 signatures overnight. Elise sat on her couch, a cup of cold coffee in her hands, tears streaming down her face as she read the messages. "I'm not alone," she whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude. The support wasn't just emotional, it was practical, too. A follower who worked as a paralegal messaged her with advice on how to file a police report and suggested she keep the livestream footage as evidence. Another fan, a small business owner, offered to start a GoFundMe to help replace the damaged supplies, writing, "You've given us so much joy with your art, Elise. Let us give back to you." Within hours, the GoFundMe was live, and donations began pouring in, $5, $10, $50 at a time, each accompanied by a message of encouragement. "You've got this. Don't let them win. Your art is worth fighting for." By the end of the day, the campaign had raised $3,000, more than enough to replace the broken canvas and spilled paint. Elise went live on TikTok to thank her followers, her voice choked with emotion. "I can't believe how amazing you all are," she said, holding up her phone to show the donation total. "This isn't just about me. It's about all of us, standing up for what we love." Elise decided to dig deeper into the letter Janet had given her. She sat at her small kitchen table, the letter spread out in front of her, a cup of chamomile tea steaming beside her. The logo, Coastal Pines HOA, looked official at first glance, with a stylized pine tree and a professional font, but something about it felt off. The paper was thin, the ink slightly smudged, and the email address at the bottom, enforcement@coastalpeninsula.net, mail to enforcement@coastalpeninsula.net, seemed too generic. Elise posted a screenshot of the letter to her TikTok, captioning it, "Does anyone know if this is real? I've never heard of Coastal Pines HOA, and my landlord says there's no HOA here. Help me figure this out." Hashtag Save Elise's Studio. Her followers jumped into action, their collective sleuthing skills coming to the rescue. Within hours, a follower who worked in cybersecurity reached out via direct message. "I ran a WHOS lookup on the domain," they wrote. "It's fake. The domain was registered 3 months ago to a company called Pinnacle Realty Ventures, with a P.O. box in San Diego. I also checked county records. There's no Coastal Pines HOA registered in Santa Cruz, or anywhere in California for that matter." Elise's heart raced as she read the message, a mix of relief and anger washing over her. Relief that she wasn't crazy, there really was no HOA. Anger that these people had targeted her, thinking she'd be an easy mark. She shared the update with her followers, who were now calling the group fake HOA cops in the comments, their outrage growing with every new piece of information. Elise knew she needed to act fast. The 48-hour deadline Janet had given her was looming, and she wasn't about to let these scammers come back and destroy more of her studio. She decided to use her platform to fight back, leveraging the power of her online community. She went live on TikTok, sitting in her damaged studio, the broken canvas and spilled paint cans visible behind her. She wore a simple white t-shirt splattered with paint, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, her hazel eyes fierce with determination. "These fake HOA cops think they can bully me into shutting down my studio," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "They broke my canvas, spilled my paint, and threatened to tear this place down. But I'm not giving up, and I know you won't either. I'm hosting a live stream tomorrow to finish this painting, and I want you all to join me. Let's show them they can't stop us. Let's show them the power of art, of community, of fighting for what we love. Will you be there?" Her followers responded with a flood of support, promising to tune in and spread the word. "We'll be there, Elise. They messed with the wrong artist. Let's make this the biggest live stream yet." Some of her followers suggested she contact the police, which Elise hadn't even considered in the chaos of the previous night. She called the Santa Cruz Police Department, her hands shaking as she dialed the number. She was connected to Officer Emily Carter, a young cop in her late 20s who had a soft spot for the arts. Her sister was an aspiring sculptor, and Emily herself had dabbled in watercolor painting as a hobby. "I've seen your TikToks," Emily said, her voice warm and reassuring. "My sister's a huge fan. She watches your live streams all the time. I'm so sorry this happened to you. What you're describing sounds like a scam. We've had reports of fake HOAs targeting people in the area, especially renters and small business owners. Can you share the footage from your live stream?" Elise emailed the video, her heart pounding as she waited for Emily's response. Emily watched the footage, her expression darkening as she saw Tony snap the canvas and Nick spill the paint. "This is vandalism and extortion," she said, her tone serious. "They're breaking the law, and we can use this video as evidence. I'd like to set up a sting operation. If they come back, we'll be ready to catch them in the act. Can you keep that live stream going tomorrow? It'll help us document everything." Elise nodded, a surge of hope rising in her chest. "I can do that," she said. "My followers will be there. They'll be watching." Emily smiled, a determined glint in her eye. "Good. Let's take these guys down." The next day, Elise prepared for her live stream with a mix of nerves and excitement. She swept the studio floor, the scent of paint still lingering in the air, and set up a new canvas on her easel. She decided to finish the stormy ocean painting, but with a twist. She incorporated the broken pieces of the original canvas into the design, gluing the splintered wood onto the new canvas and painting over it. "This painting is about surviving the storm," she told her viewers as she went live, her voice strong and clear. "It's about taking something broken and making it beautiful again. That's what we're doing right now." Over 50,000 people tuned in, a record for Elise, their comments a wave of support. "You've got this. Don't let them win. We love you, Elise." She painted with renewed energy, her brushstrokes bold and defiant, the stormy waves taking shape under her steady hand. She mixed shades of gray and blue, adding flashes of white for the lightning, her movements almost meditative as she poured her emotions into the canvas. The atmosphere in the studio was electric, the air buzzing with anticipation. Elise kept glancing at the door, her heart racing every time she heard a car pass by outside. Her viewers were on edge too, their comments reflecting their anxiety. "Are they coming back? Be careful, Elise. We're here for you." Then, right on schedule, the door burst open again. Janet, Tony, and Nick marched in, their vests on, their faces smug with confidence. Janet's voice was loud, cutting through the quiet hum of Elise's live stream. "Your 48 hours are up," she shouted, her clipboard clutched tightly in her hand. "Pay the $4,000, or we're tearing this place down, starting now." Tony grabbed a can of red paint and threw it against the wall, the color splattering like blood, the droplets running down the cream-colored paint in a gruesome streak. Nick started pulling canvases off the shelves, tossing them to the floor with a careless thud, the frames cracking as they hit the ground. Elise's viewers watched in real time, their comments exploding with anger. They're back. This is insane. Call the cops now. Elise stood her ground, her phone still recording, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. You're on camera, she said, her eyes locked on Janet. And I know you're not a real HOA. Pinnacle Realty Ventures doesn't exist in Santa Cruz. I had my followers look into it. You're scammers, and you're not taking my studio. Leave now, or you'll regret it. Janet's smirk faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face, but she tried to bluff her way through. You can't prove anything, she said, her voice less confident than before. You're just a nobody with a shed. That's when Officer Carter and her team burst through the door, their badges gleaming in the evening light, their voices commanding as they shouted. Santa Cruz PD. Hands up, you're under arrest for vandalism, extortion, and impersonating an HOA. Emily led the charge, her gun drawn but her expression calm, her training evident in her steady movements. Two other officers flanked her, their handcuffs at the ready. Janet, Tony, and Nick froze, their smug expressions melting into panic as the reality of their situation sank in. The crowd on Elise's live stream erupted in cheers, the comments scrolling so fast they were a blur. Yes, they're done. Justice for Elise. The officers moved quickly, cuffing the trio and reading them their rights as they led them out of the studio to the waiting police cars. Elise turned back to her phone, tears of relief streaming down her face as she addressed her viewers. We did it, guys, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. We stopped them, together. Thank you for being here, for believing in me, for fighting with me. This studio is ours, and they can't take it away. Her followers flooded the comments with celebration. You're a hero, Elise. So proud of you. This is the best live stream ever. Elise wiped her tears, a shaky smile spreading across her face. She picked up her brush and turned back to the canvas, adding a final stroke to the stormy ocean. A single ray of light breaking through the clouds, a symbol of hope after the storm. The arrests of Janet, Tony, and Nick were just the beginning. Officer Emily Carter and her team at the Santa Cruz Police Department wasted no time diving into the investigation, using the live stream footage as their primary piece of evidence. The video was a goldmine, capturing every moment of the group's vandalism and threats in high definition, with 50,000 witnesses watching in real time. Emily sat at her desk in the precinct, a cup of black coffee in her hand, replaying the footage on her computer. She winced as Tony threw the paint can, the red splattering across the wall, and shook her head as Nick tossed Elise's canvases to the floor. These guys are bold, she muttered to her partner, Officer Daniel Ruiz, a veteran cop with a knack for unraveling scams. But they're sloppy. They didn't even check if she was recording. Using the fake HOA letter and the domain trace from Elise's follower, the police linked Pinnacle Realty Ventures to a man named Victor Lang, a 52-year-old with a rap sheet that spanned a decade, fraud, identity theft, and money laundering, all tied to real estate scams across California. Victor had set up Pinnacle as a front to target properties in up-and-coming areas like Santa Cruz, where rising property values made land a hot commodity. His MO was simple but effective. Pose as an HOA, issue fake fines for violations, and pressure homeowners, or renters like Elise, into paying up or selling their properties at a loss. The police found a paper trail in the group's SUV, parked outside Elise's house during the arrests, which included a list of targets, fake HOA letters, and a burner phone Victor had used to communicate with his team. Elise's viral live stream had a ripple effect far beyond her small studio. The video of the arrests, which she posted to TikTok with the caption, "We stopped the fake HOA cops." Hashtag Save Elise's Studio exploded online, racking up 10 million views in just 48 hours. It was shared by influencers, art communities, and even celebrities, including a well-known actor who'd bought one of Elise's paintings at a gallery the previous year. "This is outrageous," the actor tweeted, linking to Elise's video. "Support this incredible artist. She's fighting for all of us creatives." Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Elise and hashtag FakeHOCops trended worldwide. with fans creating fan art of Elise painting in her studio, often with captions like "Art wins" and "Don't mess with creatives." A group of art students from a university in Seattle made a viral TikTok dance to celebrate Elise's victory, painting their faces with blue and red streaks to mimic the spilled paint in her studio. "We love you, Elise," they shouted at the end, their voices echoing with joy. The attention brought Elise's story to the local news. KSBW, a Santa Cruz news station, reached out for an interview, and Elise agreed, hoping to raise awareness about the scam. The reporter, a young woman named Mia Torres, met Elise in her studio, the camera crew setting up around the easel where the stormy ocean painting still sat, now a symbol of resilience with its broken pieces woven into the design. Mia was warm and empathetic, her questions gentle but pointed. "Elise, can you tell us what happened that day?" she asked, her microphone angled toward Elise. Elise took a deep breath, her hands fidgeting with a paintbrush as she recounted the incident. The door bursting open, the canvas snapping, the paint spilling across the floor. "These fake HOA cops tried to destroy my dream," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "This studio is everything to me. It's where I create, where I connect with my community. But my followers saved me. They showed up, they fought with me, and we stopped these scammers together." Mia's segment aired that evening, and it struck a chord with viewers across the Central Coast. The story was picked up by national outlets like NBC News and BuzzFeed, with headlines like "TikTok artist fights off fake HOA scam" and "How a painter's livestream took down a real estate scheme." Elise's follower count skyrocketed, jumping from 500,000 to 750,000 in a week, as people from all over the world tuned in to support her. But the most significant impact came from the other victims who began to come forward, inspired by Elise's courage. Over a dozen homeowners in Santa Cruz reported similar experiences with Pinnacle Realty Ventures, their stories eerily similar to Elise's. A 65-year-old man named Harold, who lived just a few miles away, had paid $3,000 to avoid losing his garage after Pinnacle claimed it violated HOA codes. A young family, the Garcias, had sold their home at a loss after months of harassment, with fake HOA cops showing up weekly to demand fines for everything from their kids' toys in the yard to the color of their mailbox. "They wouldn't leave us alone," Mrs. Garcia told KSBW, her voice trembling as she held her toddler on her lap. "We thought we had no choice but to sell." Elise's heart broke as she watched the news segment, her hands clenching into fists. She thought about Harold, a retired mechanic who'd saved for years to build that garage, and the Garcias, who'd lost their first home because of these scammers. She felt a surge of responsibility. She had a platform, a voice, and she needed to use it to help others. She hosted a live stream the next day, inviting the victims to join her in her studio. The space was cramped, with Harold, the Garcias, and a handful of others squeezed in among the easels and paint cans, but the atmosphere was warm, filled with a shared sense of purpose. Elise set up her phone to record, her followers tuning in by the thousands to hear the stories. "I'm not the only one these fake HOA cops targeted," Elise said, her voice strong. "These are my neighbors, my community, and they've been hurt too. Let's listen to them, and let's keep fighting for justice." Harold spoke first, his voice gruff but emotional as he described how he'd paid the fine out of fear, worried he'd lose his home. Mrs. Garcia broke down as she talked about leaving the house where her kids had taken their first steps, her husband rubbing her back as she spoke. The live stream was raw, emotional, and powerful, with Elise's followers flooding the comments with support. "This is heartbreaking. We need to stop these scammers. Elise, you're amazing for doing this." Officer Carter's investigation, meanwhile, uncovered a larger network behind Pinnacle Realty Ventures. Victor Lang wasn't working alone. He was partnered with a developer, Coastal Development Partners, who'd been buying up properties in Santa Cruz to build luxury condos aimed at wealthy retirees and tech executives. Victor's job was to scare homeowners and renters into selling, using fake HOA fines as a weapon to make their lives miserable. Elise's property was a prime target. Emily told her during a visit to the studio, a map of the area spread out on Elise's work table. "It's close to the beach, on a large lot. Perfect for their project. They thought you'd be an easy mark, a single renter, an artist, someone they could intimidate." Elise's jaw tightened, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "They thought I'd just give up," she said, her voice low but fierce. "They didn't count on my followers or on me fighting back." Elise's fans continued to rally, their support growing with every passing day. The GoFundMe to help her replace her supplies reached $15,000, with donations coming from as far away as Australia, Japan, and Germany. "You've given us so much joy with your art," Elise wrote a donor from Tokyo, who'd contributed $100. "We couldn't let these bullies win." Another group of followers, a collective of artists from New York, organized a virtual art auction, selling prints of Elise's work to raise money for the other victims. The auction raised an additional $5,000, which Elise distributed to Harold, the Garcias, and the others to help them recover their losses. "This isn't just about me," Elise said on a live stream, holding up a check she'd written for Harold. "It's about all the people these scammers hurt. We're in this together." Back in her studio, Elise returned to the stormy ocean painting, determined to finish it despite the damage. She worked late into the night, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating her workspace, the hum of crickets outside her window. She incorporated the broken pieces of the original canvas into the final design, gluing them onto the new canvas and painting over them with shades of gray and blue. The splinters became part of the waves, the cracks part of the lightning, transforming the destruction into a symbol of resilience. She called the piece, After the Storm, a testament to her journey, surviving the chaos and emerging stronger. She decided to auction the painting on her TikTok, with all proceeds going to a local charity for artists in need. The live-streamed auction was a hit, with fans bidding eagerly, their comments filled with admiration. "This is so beautiful. The story behind it gives me chills. I need this in my house." The painting sold for $2,000, a record for Elise, to a fan from New York who wrote, "This piece means so much to me. It's a reminder that we can overcome anything." Elise packaged the painting with care, her heart full as she taped the box shut. She'd turned a moment of pain into something beautiful, and she knew this was just the beginning of her fight. The arrests of Janet, Tony, and Nick set the stage for a larger legal battle, one that would unravel the web of deceit spun by Victor Lang and his associates. Officer Emily Carter and her team at the Santa Cruz Police Department worked tirelessly, collaborating with the district attorney to build a case against Pinnacle Realty Ventures. The evidence was overwhelming. Elise's live stream footage, the fake HOA letter, the domain trace, the burner phone, and the list of targets found in the SUV painted a clear picture of a calculated scam. But the investigation didn't stop at Pinnacle. Emily's team uncovered a direct link to Coastal Development Partners, a developer that had been quietly buying up properties in Santa Cruz to build a series of luxury condos aimed at wealthy buyers looking for vacation homes. Victor's role was to clear the way, using fake HOA fines to pressure homeowners and renters into selling at below-market prices, allowing Coastal Development to swoop in and profit. The district attorney charged Victor Lang with racketeering, fraud, and extortion, serious crimes that carried a potential sentence of up to 20 years in prison. Janet, Tony, and Nick were charged as accomplices, facing up to 5 years each for their roles in the scam. Coastal Development Partners, though harder to pin down legally, was hit with a civil lawsuit for conspiracy to commit fraud, with the DA seeking to seize their assets to compensate the victims. Emily visited Elise in her studio to update her, bringing a file of documents and a map of the properties Coastal Development had targeted. They had big plans for this area, Emily said, pointing to Elise's house on the map. "Your lot was key. It's one of the largest in the neighborhood, and its proximity to the beach made it perfect for their condos. They thought they could scare you into leaving." Elise's eyes narrowed, her fingers tightening around the paintbrush she was holding. "They underestimated me," she said, her voice low but fierce. "And they underestimated my community." Elise's story had already captured the public's imagination, but the legal proceedings turned her into a symbol of resistance for artists and creatives everywhere. Her TikTok following soared to over 1 million, with fans dubbing her the artist who fought back. She was invited to speak at an art festival in San Francisco, a prestigious event that drew artists, curators, and enthusiasts from across the state. Elise was nervous as she prepared for the speech, standing in her studio the night before, practicing in front of a mirror. She wore a simple linen dress splattered with paint, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her hazel eyes bright with determination. "You can do this," she told her reflection, taking a deep breath. The next day, she stood on a stage in Golden Gate Park. A crowd of hundreds gathered before her, their faces a mix of admiration and curiosity. "They tried to take my studio, my safe space," she said, her voice echoing through the microphone. "They broke my canvas, spilled my paint, and told me I had 48 hours to tear it down. But they didn't know I had a community behind me, an army of dreamers who believe in the power of art. Art is about resilience. It's about creating beauty from pain, hope from despair. That's what we did here. We fought back, and we won." The audience erupted in applause, many holding up signs that read, #SaveEliseStudio and Art Wins. A group of kids in the front row waved small canvases they'd painted, each one a miniature version of Elise's stormy ocean. Elise smiled, tears in her eyes, as she stepped off the stage, overwhelmed by the love and support. Back in Santa Cruz, the community around Elise's house rallied in a way she'd never expected. Local artists, inspired by her story, organized a mural project to celebrate her victory. They gathered in her backyard on a sunny Saturday, a group of a dozen painters ranging from teenagers to retirees, their hands covered in paint as they worked on the side of her studio. Elise watched in awe as the mural took shape, a vibrant seascape with rolling waves, a golden sun rising over the horizon, and a small figure painting at an easel, her brush poised mid-stroke. The words, "Elise's Sanctuary," were painted in bold, swirling letters across the top, a testament to the space's significance. "We wanted to honor what you've done," said Maria, a 50-year-old sculptor who'd led the project. "You fought for your art, and you fought for all of us." Elise hugged her, tears streaming down her face as the group cheered. The mural became a tourist attraction, drawing visitors who'd seen Elise's story online, their cameras flashing as they posed in front of the artwork. "I came all the way from LA to see this," a young artist named Chloe told Elise, snapping a photo. "You're an inspiration. I'm starting my own TikTok because of you." Elise smiled, her heart full. "This isn't just my studio anymore," she said, looking at the mural. "It's ours." The trial against Victor Lang was a media spectacle, with news crews from CNN, NBC, and local stations camped outside the Santa Cruz County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed, with Elise sitting in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wore a simple gray blazer over her paint-splattered dress, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, her expression a mix of nerves and determination. The prosecution called her as a witness, and she took the stand, her voice steady as she recounted the day of the attack. "They came into my studio without permission," she said, her eyes locked on Victor, who sat at the defense table, his face impassive. "They broke my canvas, a painting I'd spent hours on, spilled my paint, and threatened to tear down my studio if I didn't pay $4,000. They called it an unapproved structure, but I knew there was no HOA. I live-streamed the whole thing to 50,000 people, and they saw everything." The prosecutor played the footage, the courtroom silent as the video showed Tony snapping the canvas, Nick throwing paint, and Janet's cold threats. The jury was visibly moved, several members shaking their heads in disbelief. Elise held up a photo of the damage, her hands trembling slightly, and then showed the finished after the storm painting, its broken pieces woven into the design. "This is what I made from their destruction," she said, her voice strong. "They tried to break me, but they only made me stronger." Victor's defense attorney tried to downplay his role, arguing that he was a small-time operator who'd been manipulated by coastal development partners, but the evidence was overwhelming. The burner phone, the list of targets, the fake HOA letters, and the email chains between Victor and coastal development painted a clear picture of a calculated scheme. After a week-long trial, the jury deliberated for just 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts: racketeering, fraud, and extortion. The judge sentenced Victor to 10 years in prison, with an additional 5 years of probation, and ordered him to pay restitution to the victims. Janet, Tony, and Nick took plea deals, testifying against Victor in exchange for reduced sentences. They each received 3 years, with orders to pay their share of the restitution, $10, each to Elise and the other victims. Coastal Development Partners, under pressure from the civil lawsuit, settled for $2.5 million, with the money distributed among the victims. Elise received $50,000, a sum that left her stunned as she sat in her studio, staring at the check. She knew exactly what she wanted to do with it. She started a small art fund, offering grants to young artists in Santa Cruz who couldn't afford supplies or studio space. She named it the After the Storm Fund, a nod to the painting that had become a symbol of her journey. "I want to give others the chance I had," she said at the fund's launch, cutting the ribbon with a paintbrush, her studio packed with local artists, neighbors, and supporters. "Art saved me. It gave me a voice, a purpose. Now I wanted to save others." The fund awarded its first grant, a $1,000 stipend, to a 16-year-old girl named Aaliyah, who'd been painting in her school's cafeteria because she had nowhere else to work. "Thank you, Elise," Aaliyah said, tears in her eyes as she accepted the check. "This means I can finally have my own easel, my own space." Elise hugged her, her heart swelling with pride. The aftermath of the trial sent shockwaves through the real estate industry in California. Developers across the state were forced to audit their practices, with several facing investigations for similar schemes. Lawmakers in Sacramento took notice, introducing a bill called Elise's Law, which made it a felony to impersonate an HOA with intent to defraud, with specific protections for renters and creatives, two groups often targeted by such scams. The bill also established a task force to investigate real estate fraud, with a focus on coastal areas like Santa Cruz, where gentrification was driving up property values and creating opportunities for exploitation. Elise Harper showed us what's at stake, a state senator said at a press conference, holding up a photo of Elise in her studio, paintbrush in hand. "She's a reminder that our communities, our artists, our dreamers, deserve protection. We're fighting for every studio, every small business, every home out there." Elise watched the press conference on her phone, sitting in her studio with a cup of tea, the mural outside glowing in the afternoon light. She thought about the day the fake HOA cops had stormed in, how terrified she'd been, how close she'd come to losing everything. But she also thought about the strength she'd found, in herself, in her art, in her community. "We did it," she whispered, a small smile playing on her lips. "We turned pain into purpose." She picked up her brush and turned back to her easel, a new canvas waiting for her next creation. In the years that followed the trial, Elise Harper's studio became more than just a place to paint. It became a symbol of creativity, resilience, and the power of community. Her TikTok following continued to grow, reaching over 2 million followers across platforms, with fans from every corner of the globe tuning in to watch her paint. Her live streams were a daily ritual for many, a source of calm and inspiration in a chaotic world. "I watch you every morning while I drink my coffee," wrote a fan from Sweden. "Your voice, your brushstrokes, they make me feel like everything's going to be okay." Elise read the message during a live stream, her eyes misting over as she smiled at the camera. "That means the world to me," she said, her voice soft. "This isn't just about art. It's about connection, about reminding each other that we're not alone." Elise's story had a profound impact on young artists, many of whom credited her with giving them the courage to pursue their dreams. Letters and emails poured in, each one a testament to her influence. A 16-year-old girl from Texas wrote, "I started painting because of you, Elise. I was scared to show my work, but seeing you fight for your studio made me brave. I'm applying to art school next year." A 20-year-old from Canada shared a photo of his first gallery show, writing, "You showed me that art is worth fighting for. I wouldn't be here without you." Elise kept every letter, pinning them to a corkboard in her studio, a constant reminder of why she kept going. "You're changing lives," her mom told her during a visit, her voice thick with emotion as she looked at the board. "I always knew you would." Elise hugged her, tears in her eyes. "I learned from the best," she said, thinking of all the sacrifices her mom had made to support her dreams. The After the Storm Fund became a cornerstone of Elise's legacy, growing into a vital resource for young artists in Santa Cruz. With the $50,000 she'd received from the lawsuit settlement, plus additional donations from her followers, the fund expanded to offer not just grants, but also mentorship and studio space. Elise rented a small warehouse a few blocks from her house, turning it into a shared workspace where grant recipients could paint, sculpt, and create without worrying about the cost of rent or supplies. She decorated the space with bright murals, painted by the artists themselves, and filled it with easels, tables, and shelves of materials, all donated by her followers and local businesses. "This is your space," she told the first group of recipients, a mix of teens and young adults, their eyes wide with excitement as they explored the warehouse. "Create, dream, grow. I'll be here if you need me." The fund awarded grants to dozens of artists in its first year, with recipients like Aaliyah, the 16-year-old who'd received the first grant, going on to win local art competitions and gain recognition in the community. Elise also started hosting monthly workshops in her studio, opening the doors to kids and teens who wanted to learn about art. The workshops were a hit, with the small space packed every session, the air filled with the smell of paint and the sound of laughter. Elise taught everything from basic brush techniques to advanced color theory, but her favorite part was watching the kids express themselves. "Art isn't about being perfect," she told a shy 12-year-old named Lucas, who'd been hesitant to show his abstract painting, a swirl of reds and yellows that reminded Elise of a sunset. "It's about showing who you are. This is beautiful." Lucas beamed, his confidence growing with every stroke. The workshops became a community hub, with parents, neighbors, and even Officer Emily Carter stopping by to join in. Emily, who'd become a friend after the arrests, brought her sister, a sculptor named Clara, to one of the sessions, and the two of them painted alongside the kids, their laughter echoing through the studio. "You've created something special here," Emily told Elise, her hands covered in blue paint. "This place, it heals people." Elise smiled, her heart full. "That's all I ever wanted," she said. The community around Elise's house transformed in the wake of her fight. Neighbors who'd once kept to themselves, their interactions limited to a wave or a nod, started looking out for each other, forming a tight-knit group that met monthly to discuss ways to support local artists. They organized art fairs in the neighborhood park, where kids sold their paintings alongside professionals, the air filled with the sound of live music and the scent of food trucks. They hosted gallery nights at the warehouse, showcasing the work of After the Storm Fund recipients, with Elise acting as MC, her warm voice introducing each artist to a crowd of supporters. They even started a fundraiser for a local arts center, raising $20,000 in a single year to create a permanent space for classes and exhibitions. "Elise brought us together," a neighbor named Sarah said at one of the gallery nights, holding up a small seascape she'd bought from Aaliyah. "She reminded us what it means to fight for what you love and to fight for each other." Elise's law, passed in California with overwhelming support, a testament to the impact of her story. The bill made it a felony to impersonate an HOA with intent to defraud, with specific protections for renters and creatives, two groups often targeted by such scams. It also established a task force to investigate real estate fraud, with a focus on coastal areas like Santa Cruz, where gentrification was creating opportunities for exploitation. Similar laws were proposed in other states, including New York, Oregon, and Florida, with advocacy groups for artists using Elise's story to push for change. They distributed flyers with tips on how to spot fake HOAs, check county records, verify email domains, report suspicious activity, and included a photo of Elise in her studio, paintbrush in hand, with the caption, "Elise Harper fought for her art and won. You can too." Elise showed us the power of art, an advocate said at a rally in Los Angeles, her voice amplified through a megaphone. "She's a reminder that creativity can overcome anything, that one voice, one brushstroke, can change the world." For Elise, the greatest reward was her studio itself, the space that had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. On the third anniversary of the incident, she held a special live stream to celebrate, inviting her followers, neighbors, Officer Carter, and the After the Storm Fund recipients to join her. The studio was packed, with people spilling out into the backyard, their laughter and chatter filling the air. They unveiled a new mural on the studio's interior wall, a collaborative piece painted by the kids from her workshops. The mural depicted a vibrant ocean, with waves and shades of blue and green, a golden sun rising in the distance, and small figures painting, sculpting, and dancing along the shore. The words, "Art heals," were woven into the waves, a mantra that had come to define Elise's mission. "This studio is my heart," Elise said on the live stream, her voice full of emotion as she stood in front of the mural, her followers watching from around the world. 3 years ago, I thought I'd lose it. But you all helped me save it. My neighbors, my community, my incredible fans. Let's keep creating, keep fighting, keep dreaming together." Her viewers flooded the comments with love. "You're our hero, Elise. This is so beautiful. Never stop painting." As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the studio, Elise sat at her easel, starting a new painting. A sunrise over the ocean, its colors soft and hopeful, pinks and oranges blending into a clear blue sky. She thought about the day the fake HOA cops had tried to take everything from her, the fear, the anger, the uncertainty. But she also thought about what had come after, the strength she'd found in herself, the love she'd received from her community, the lives she'd touched through her art. "They thought they could break me," she whispered, dipping her brush into a pale yellow, the color of dawn. "But they only made me stronger." The studio hummed with life around her, the mural glowing in the fading light, the laughter of her friends and neighbors a melody of hope. This wasn't just a studio anymore. It was a movement, a testament to the power of art, community, and a woman who refused to let her dreams be taken away. Elise Harper turned her studio into a beacon of hope, a place where art heals and dreams thrive. 3 years ago, a group of fake HOA cops thought they could destroy her passion. They broke her canvas, spilled her paint, and threatened to tear down the space she'd built with her own hands. But they didn't know Elise was a TikTok star with a community of 2 million dreamers who'd rally to her side, who'd fight for her with every like, share, and donation. They didn't know she'd turn their destruction into a movement, using her art to lift up others, to create a fund for young artists, to inspire a law that protects creatives across California. Now, her studio isn't just a place to paint. It's a sanctuary for anyone who dares to dream, a reminder that creativity can overcome even the darkest storms. This is HOA Karen Files, where we shine a light on the dreamers who refuse to back down, the ones who turn pain into purpose and fear into hope. I want to hear from you. Have you or someone you know been targeted by a fake HOA? Maybe they tried to shut down your small business, your garden, or your creative space. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and your story could be the next one we tell. If you've been inspired by Elise, if her fight has given you the courage to stand up for what you love, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to HOA Karen Files. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss an episode. We've got more stories of justice, more tales of triumph, coming your way. We'll see you soon. And until then, let's keep painting a brighter future, one brushstroke at a time. Fake HOA cops targeted a veteran's memorial garden. He's a retired colonel. This is the memorial garden of Colonel James "Jim" Carter, a retired Army veteran in Texas who built this sacred space to honor his fallen comrades. Every rose, every name on this plaque represents a soldier he served with, a brother or sister he lost. But a group of fake HOA cops showed up, called it an unauthorized structure, and tried to bulldoze it, disrespecting the memory of those who gave their lives. They didn't know Jim is a retired colonel with 30 years of military strategy and a network of veterans who'd fight for him. This is HOA Karen Files, where we expose the bullies who target the brave. Ever had a fake HOA disrespect something sacred to you? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more. Let's dive into how Jim defended this garden and turned the tables on these scammers. Colonel James "Jim" Carter, a 68-year-old retired Army veteran, lived in a modest ranch-style house in a quiet suburb of San Antonio, Texas. The house was simple, white siding, a wraparound porch, and a neatly trimmed lawn, but the backyard was a masterpiece. There, Jim had spent the last 5 years building a memorial garden to honor the soldiers he'd served with during his 30-year military career. The garden was a labor of love, a sacred space where Jim could remember the men and women who'd fought beside him, many of whom never made it home. At the center stood a flagpole, the American flag flying proudly, its colors vivid against the Texas sky. Surrounding the flagpole were rows of red roses, their blooms vibrant and meticulously cared for. each bush planted in memory of a fallen comrade. A stone plaque sat at the base of the flagpole, engraved with the names of 12 soldiers Jim had lost over the years, friends, brothers, sisters in arms. A wooden bench faced the plaque, a place where Jim would sit every evening, a cup of black coffee in hand, reflecting on the sacrifices made by those he'd served with. Jim had joined the Army at 18, straight out of high school in a small Texas town, driven by a sense of duty and a desire to serve his country. He rose through the ranks over 3 decades, serving in conflicts from the Gulf War to Afghanistan, earning a Bronze Star for his leadership under fire. He'd seen more than most, battlefields stained with blood, the faces of young soldiers who'd never see their families again, the weight of command in moments of life and death. When he retired at 62, a colonel with a chest full of medals, he returned to San Antonio to live a quieter life. But the memories of his fallen comrades never left him. "I made a promise," he'd often say, his voice gruff but steady. "I told them I'd never forget. This garden, it's my way of keeping that promise." The garden wasn't just a tribute. It was a community space. Jim's neighbors, many of whom had veterans in their own families, often visited, bringing their kids to learn about the soldiers whose names were on the plaque. On Memorial Day and Veterans Day, Jim would host small ceremonies, inviting the neighborhood to join him in raising the flag and sharing stories about the fallen. "This is for Tommy," he'd say, pointing to a rose bush as he told the story of a young private who died saving his squad in Iraq. "And this is for Maria," he'd add, gesturing to another, recounting the bravery of a medic who'd given her life in Afghanistan. The kids would listen wide-eyed, their parents wiping away tears, the garden a living testament to the cost of freedom. On a warm September afternoon, Jim was in the garden, pruning the roses with a pair of shears, the scent of the blooms filling the air. He wore his usual outfit, faded jeans, a gray army t-shirt, and a baseball cap with his unit's insignia. The sun was high, the sky a brilliant blue, and Jim hummed an old marching tune as he worked, his hands steady despite the arthritis that had crept into his joints. He was thinking about adding a new rose bush for a soldier named Daniel, a young sergeant who'd passed away just a year ago from injuries sustained in combat, when he heard the sound of a car pulling into his driveway. He set down his shears, wiping his hands on a rag, and walked around to the front of the house, his brow furrowing as he saw a black SUV with tinted windows. 3 people stepped out, all wearing black vests with HOA compliance in bold white letters. The leader, a man in his 50s named Richard Hayes, carried a clipboard and a camera, snapping photos of Jim's property without asking. The other 2, a woman named Linda and a younger man named Greg, followed close behind, their expressions stern. Richard approached Jim, his voice clipped and authoritative. "Mr. Carter, your backyard structure is in violation of Lone Star HOA regulations," he said, handing Jim a letter stamped with a fake logo. "That garden and flagpole are unauthorized. You need to remove them within 72 hours or pay a $5,000 fine. Failure to comply will result in demolition." Jim's jaw tightened, his military training kicking in as he assessed the situation. "Lone Star HOA," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "I've lived here 10 years. There's no HOA in this neighborhood. This garden is a memorial for fallen soldiers. You're on private property, and I'm asking you to leave." Richard smirked, his eyes cold. "Lone Star HOA was established last year," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "You're under our jurisdiction now. Pay the fine, or we'll be back with a crew to tear it down." Linda stepped forward, her camera flashing as she took photos of the garden, the roses, the plaque. Greg, the younger man, walked over to the flagpole and gave it a shake, testing its stability, his disrespect evident in his careless movements. "This thing's an eyesore," he muttered, loud enough for Jim to hear. Jim's hands clenched into fists, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and disbelief. He'd faced enemies on the battlefield, but this was a different kind of fight. "Get off my property," he said, his voice low and commanding, the kind of tone that had once rallied troops under fire. "Now." The group laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed through the quiet afternoon. "You've got 72 hours, old man," Richard said, before they got back in their SUV and drove off, leaving Jim standing in his driveway, the letter crumpled in his hand. He walked back to the garden, his steps heavy, and sat on the bench, staring at the plaque. The names seemed to blur as his eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of rage. This garden was sacred, a tribute to the soldiers he'd loved like family. He thought of Tommy, Maria, Daniel, all the names on that plaque, all the lives lost. They're not touching this garden, he said to himself, his voice a vow. Not while I'm still breathing. Jim knew he had the skills, the experience, and the network to fight back. He'd spent 30 years strategizing against enemies far more dangerous than these scammers. It was time to go to war. That evening, Jim sat at his kitchen table, a map of the neighborhood spread out in front of him, a notepad filled with names and numbers. He made a series of calls, his voice steady as he reached out to his network of veterans, men and women he'd served with, who'd answer his call without hesitation. I need your help, he told each one, explaining the situation. They're trying to destroy a memorial for our brothers and sisters. We can't let that happen. By the end of the night, he had a plan and a team ready to execute it. The fake HOA cops had no idea who they were dealing with. Jim Carter didn't waste a moment after the fake HOA cops left his property. He knew from his years in the military that the key to any successful operation was preparation, intelligence, and a well-coordinated team. Sitting at his kitchen table, the letter from Lone Star HOA in front of him, he studied it with the same intensity he'd once used to analyze enemy movements. The logo looked official, but Jim noticed the details: the cheap paper, the slightly off-center stamp, the generic email address, compliance@lonestaroa.org, mailtocompliance@lonestaroa.org. He'd dealt with enough bureaucracy in the Army to know what a real official document looked like, and this wasn't it. Amateurs, he muttered, a grim smile crossing his face. He picked up his phone and called his first ally, Captain Maria Alvarez, a retired intelligence officer who'd served under him in Afghanistan. Maria, now 55, lived just an hour away in Austin and ran a small cybersecurity firm. Jim, it's been too long, she said, her voice warm but concerned as he explained the situation. A fake HOA targeting a memorial garden? That's low, even for scammers. I'll dig into this Lone Star HOA. Give me a few hours. Maria got to work, using her skills to trace the domain. She found that Lonestaroa.org was registered just 4 months ago to a shell company called Horizon Property Group, with a P.O. box in Dallas. A quick search of county records confirmed what Jim suspected. There was no Lone Star HOA registered in San Antonio. It's a scam, Maria told him over the phone, her voice sharp with anger. Horizon Property Group has ties to a developer, Texas Sun Builders, known for shady land grabs. They've been targeting properties in your area, trying to force people out so they can build a strip mall. Jim's next call was to Major Tom Reynolds, a 60-year-old retired logistics officer who lived in Houston. Tom had a knack for organizing resources, a skill he'd honed during deployments when supplies were scarce. I need boots on the ground, Jim told him. We're setting up a perimeter around the garden, and I want to catch these guys in the act. Tom didn't hesitate. I'll round up the crew, he said. We'll be there by morning. True to his word, Tom arrived at Jim's house at dawn, bringing with him a team of 5 veterans, men and women who'd served with Jim over the years, all eager to defend the memorial garden. There was Sarah, a former sniper with a sharp eye, Carlos, a combat engineer who knew how to set up surveillance, and Emily, a medic who'd saved Jim's life during a firefight in Iraq. They gathered in Jim's living room, their faces a mix of determination and camaraderie, the kind of bond forged in the crucible of war. Jim briefed the team, laying out his plan with the precision of a military operation. We're dealing with scammers who think they can intimidate an old man, he said, his voice steady. They're coming back in 72 hours, and we'll be ready. Carlos, I want cameras around the garden, hidden, but with clear angles. Sarah, you're on lookout. I need eyes on the street. Emily, you'll coordinate with the local police. I've got a contact there who can help. Tom, you and I will handle the confrontation. Maria's working on the intel, and she'll have more for us soon. We're not just protecting the garden. We're taking these bastards down. The team nodded, their training kicking in, their loyalty to Jim unwavering. They spent the day setting up, installing small security cameras in the trees around the garden, their lenses trained on the flagpole and plaque. Sarah positioned herself on the roof with a pair of binoculars, her vantage point giving her a clear view of the street. Emily met with Officer Daniel Martinez, a San Antonio PD officer who'd served in the National Guard and respected Jim's service. "We'll have a team on standby," Daniel promised. "Just give us the signal." While the team prepared, Jim reached out to his neighbors, knocking on doors to explain the situation. He stood on their porches, his cap in hand, his voice calm but firm as he told them about the fake HOA and the threat to the garden. "This isn't just about me," he said. "This garden is for all of us. It's for every soldier who didn't come home. I need your support." The neighbors, many of whom had attended Jim's Memorial Day ceremonies, were outraged. Mrs. Lopez, a 70-year-old widow whose son had served in the Navy, offered to bake cookies for the veterans helping Jim. Mr. Thompson, a retired teacher, promised to spread the word on the neighborhood's Facebook group, rallying more support. By the end of the day, a small crowd had gathered in Jim's backyard, bringing lawn chairs and thermoses of coffee, determined to stand with him. "We're not letting them touch that garden," Mrs. Lopez said, her voice fierce. Jim nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. He'd fought for his country, and now his community was fighting for him. On the third day, as the 72-hour deadline approached, Jim and his team were ready. The garden was quiet, the roses glowing in the morning light, the flags snapping in the breeze. Jim stood by the flagpole, his posture straight, his eyes scanning the street. Sarah's voice crackled through a walkie-talkie. "Black SUV approaching, 3 occupants." "It's them." Jim's jaw tightened, his military instincts kicking in. He signaled to Carlos, who started the cameras, and to Emily, who called Officer Martinez. The neighbors stood behind Jim, their faces a mix of anger and resolve, their presence a silent show of support. Richard, Linda, and Greg stepped out of the SUV, their vests on, their expressions smug. Richard carried a megaphone, his voice booming as he approached the garden. "Time's up, Carter," he shouted. "Pay the $5,000, or we're tearing this down, starting with that flagpole." Greg grabbed a pair of bolt cutters, moving toward the flagpole as if to cut it down, while Linda started taking more photos, her camera flashing. Jim stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding, the kind of tone that had once stopped soldiers in their tracks. "You're on camera," he said, pointing to the trees where the cameras were hidden. "And I know you're not a real HOA. Horizon Property Group, Texas Sun Builders, I've got your whole operation figured out. You're scammers, and you're not touching this garden." Richard's smirk faltered, but he tried to bluff. "You can't prove anything," he said, his voice less confident. That's when Officer Martinez and his team moved in, sirens blaring as 3 police cars surrounded the SUV. "San Antonio PD," Martinez shouted, his badge out. "You're under arrest for extortion, vandalism, and impersonating an HOA." The neighbors cheered as Richard, Linda, and Greg were handcuffed, their smug expressions replaced with panic. Jim watched, his arms crossed, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. "You picked the wrong garden to mess with," he said, his voice low. The cameras had captured everything, and Jim knew this was just the beginning of the fight. With Richard, Linda, and Greg in custody, Officer Martinez and his team at the San Antonio Police Department began unraveling the scam. The footage from Jim's cameras was damning, showing the group's threats and Greg's attempt to cut down the flagpole, a clear act of vandalism. Maria Alvarez, Jim's intelligence officer, sent over her findings on Horizon Property Group, linking it to Texas Sun Builders, a developer with a history of aggressive land acquisition tactics. The police raided Horizon's P.O. box in Dallas, uncovering a treasure trove of evidence: fake HOA letters, lists of targeted properties, and financial records showing over $50,000 in extorted fines from homeowners across San Antonio. The operation was led by a man named Eddie Monroe, a 48-year-old with a rap sheet for fraud and embezzlement, who'd partnered with Texas Sun Builders to clear land for a strip mall project. Jim's confrontation with the fake HOA cops had been live-streamed by one of his neighbors, a teenager named Ethan who'd posted the video to TikTok with the caption, "Veteran shuts down fake HOA trying to destroy Memorial Garden. #Justice for Colonel Jim." The video went viral, racking up 5 million views in 24 hours, shared across platforms by veterans groups, military families, and patriotic organizations. Hashtags like #Justice for Colonel Jim and #Save the Memorial Garden trended nationwide, with comments flooding in. "This is disgusting. How dare they? Colonel Jim is a hero. We need to protect our veterans. A local news station, KSAT 12, picked up the story, interviewing Jim in his garden, the flagpole and roses in the background. This garden is for my brothers and sisters who didn't come home, Jim said, his voice steady but emotional. These scammers thought they could disrespect their memory. They were wrong. The viral attention brought more victims forward. Over 20 homeowners in San Antonio reported similar experiences with Lone Star HOA, including a 75-year-old woman named Mrs. Rivera who'd paid $2,000 to avoid losing her shed, and a young couple who'd been harassed into selling their home after fake fines for their kid's playset. They kept coming back, the husband told KSAT, his voice shaking. We couldn't take it anymore. Jim's heart ached as he heard their stories, his resolve hardening. He hosted a meeting in his backyard, inviting the victims to share their experiences, the garden a fitting backdrop for their collective fight. We're not just saving this garden, Jim told them, his voice strong. We're saving our homes, our memories, our community. The neighbors nodded, their faces a mix of anger and hope, ready to stand with Jim. Maria's investigation uncovered a larger network. Texas Sun Builders was part of a conglomerate, Sunbelt Development, which had similar operations in 5 other states: Florida, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and North Carolina. This is bigger than San Antonio, Maria told Jim over the phone, her voice urgent. Eddie Monroe is just a middleman. Sunbelt is the real player. They've been doing this for years, targeting veterans, seniors, anyone they think won't fight back. Jim's jaw tightened, his military mind already strategizing. Then we take it to the feds, he said. He called a contact at the FBI, a former Army buddy named Agent Mark Sullivan, who worked in the white-collar crime division. Mark, I've got a case for you, Jim said, sending over Maria's files. These guys are preying on veterans. They need to be stopped. Mark promised to escalate the case, coordinating with the San Antonio PD to build a federal indictment. The community support for Jim grew stronger with every passing day. Veterans groups across Texas rallied, organizing a Stand for the Garden event in Jim's backyard, where over 100 veterans showed up in uniform, saluting the flag and sharing stories of their own fallen comrades. The event was live-streamed on Facebook, drawing thousands of viewers, many of whom donated to a GoFundMe set up by Ethan to help Jim expand the garden. The campaign raised $20,000, with donations from as far away as Germany and Japan, where soldiers who'd served with Jim sent messages of support. You were my CO in Iraq, wrote a former private from Japan. You saved my life. Now I'm helping save your garden. Jim used the money to add a new section to the garden, a small fountain with a plaque honoring all veterans, a place for the community to reflect and heal. Back in the garden, Jim planted the new rose bush for Daniel, the sergeant who'd passed away the previous year. He worked slowly, his hands steady as he dug the hole, the scent of the earth grounding him. The neighbors gathered around, watching in silence, their presence a quiet show of support. This is for you, Danny, Jim said, placing the rose bush in the ground, his voice thick with emotion. We're keeping your memory alive. Mrs. Lopez handed him a tissue, her own eyes misty, and the group shared a moment of silence, the flag above them waving gently in the breeze. Jim knew the fight wasn't over, but he also knew he wasn't alone. The legal battle against Horizon Property Group and Texas Sun Builders moved swiftly, thanks to the evidence Jim and his team had gathered. The San Antonio PD, working with the FBI, raided Texas Sun Builders' headquarters in Dallas, seizing computers, financial records, and email chains that detailed the scam. The evidence was overwhelming. Eddie Monroe had been running the operation for 2 years, extorting over $100,000 from homeowners across Texas, with Texas Sun Builders taking a cut of the profits to fund their strip mall project. The FBI expanded the investigation, uncovering Sunbelt Development's operations in 5 other states, leading to a federal indictment for racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Jim's story became a rallying cry for veterans and military families across the country. The viral TikTok video of the confrontation, combined with the KSAT 12 news segment, caught the attention of national outlets like Fox News and CNN, with headlines like "Retired Colonel Defends Memorial Garden from Fake HOA Scam" and "Veterans Fight Exposes Real Estate Fraud." Jim was invited to speak at a Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFW convention in Austin, where he shared his story with a crowd of 500 veterans. "They thought they could disrespect our fallen," he said, his voice echoing through the hall, the flagpole from his garden projected on a screen behind him. "But we showed them what happens when you mess with a soldier's memory." The audience gave him a standing ovation, many saluting as Jim stepped off the stage, his chest tight with emotion. Back in San Antonio, the community turned Jim's garden into a symbol of resistance. Local veterans groups organized weekly visits, bringing their families to pay respects at the plaque, the garden becoming a pilgrimage site for those who'd served. A group of high school students, inspired by Jim's story, started a Veterans Voices project, interviewing Jim and other local vets to document their stories, which they published in a book sold to raise money for the garden. "Colonel Jim taught us what honor looks like," one of the students, a 17-year-old named Mia, told KSAT during a follow-up story. "We want to make sure no one forgets." The book raised $5,000, which Jim used to add a small gazebo to the garden, a shaded spot for visitors to sit and reflect. The trial against Eddie Monroe was a media frenzy, with Jim testifying as the key witness. He sat on the stand, his posture straight, his Army medals pinned to his jacket, his voice steady as he recounted the day of the confrontation. "They threatened to bulldoze a memorial for fallen soldiers," he said, his eyes locked on Eddie, who sat at the defense table, his face pale. "They disrespected the memory of men and women who gave their lives for this country. I couldn't let that stand." The prosecution played the footage from Jim's cameras, the jury watching in silence as Greg approached the flagpole with bolt cutters, Richard's threats booming through the megaphone. The evidence was irrefutable, and after a 3-day trial, the jury found Eddie guilty on all counts, sentencing him to 12 years in prison. Richard, Linda, and Greg took plea deals, testifying against Eddie in exchange for 4-year sentences each, with orders to pay restitution to the victims. Texas Sun Builders settled a civil lawsuit for $3 million, with the money distributed among the victims. Jim used his share to establish a small scholarship fund for children of veterans in San Antonio, naming it the Fallen Heroes Fund. "I want their kids to have the opportunities they fought for," he said at the fund's launch, cutting the ribbon with a pair of ceremonial scissors, the garden packed with supporters. The fund awarded its first scholarship, a $2,000 grant, to Mia, the high school student who'd led the Veterans Voices project, helping her attend college to study history. "Thank you, Colonel Jim," she said, hugging him, her eyes shining with gratitude. The aftermath of the trial had a ripple effect. Sunbelt Development was hit with a $5 million fine, its assets seized to compensate victims across the country, and the FBI's investigation led to dozens of arrests in other states. Lawmakers in Texas introduced a bill called Carter's Law, making it a felony to impersonate an HOA with intent to defraud, with specific protections for veterans and seniors. "Colonel Jim Carter showed us what's at stake," a state representative said at a press conference, holding up a photo of Jim in his garden. "We're fighting for every memorial, every home, every memory out there." In the years that followed, Jim's memorial garden became a beacon of honor and healing, not just for San Antonio, but for veterans across the country. The garden grew, with Jim adding new rose bushes for fallen soldiers as their families reached out, asking to be included. Each planting was a ceremony, with Jim and the community gathering to share stories, the flag raised in salute, the scent of roses filling the air. The gazebo became a gathering spot, where veterans would sit and talk, their voices low as they shared memories of their service, the garden a safe space to heal from the wounds of war, both visible and invisible. Jim's story inspired a wave of activism among veterans groups, who used his fight to advocate for stronger protections against real estate scams. The VFW launched a national campaign, Protect Our Heroes, distributing flyers with tips on spotting fake HOAs and reporting fraud, with Jim's garden as the centerpiece. "Colonel Jim Carter fought for our fallen." The campaign's slogan read, "Now we fight for him, and for every veteran." The campaign led to new laws in 10 states, with Carter's Law becoming a model for legislation nationwide. Advocacy groups for seniors also joined the cause, using Jim's story to highlight the vulnerability of older homeowners, ensuring that protections extended to all. The community around Jim's house became a family, their bond forged in the fight to save the garden. Neighbors started a Veterans Day of Service, where they'd volunteer to maintain the garden, planting new flowers, cleaning the plaque, and raising the flag, their kids learning the names of the soldiers as they worked. The high school students who'd started the Veterans Voices project expanded it, creating a podcast where they interviewed veterans across Texas, their stories reaching thousands of listeners. Colonel Jim showed us the power of one voice, Mia said on the podcast's first episode, her voice clear and confident. He taught us to honor the past by fighting for the future. Jim, now 71, continued to tend the garden, his hands slower, but his spirit as strong as ever. On the 5th anniversary of the incident, he held a special ceremony, inviting the community, his veteran team, Officer Martinez, and the families of the fallen soldiers named on the plaque. The garden was packed, with over 200 people gathered, the flagpole at the center, the roses in full bloom. They unveiled a new addition, a bronze statue of a soldier saluting, a gift from the VFW, with a plaque that read, "In honor of Colonel Jim Carter and the fallen heroes of the Memorial Garden." "This garden isn't just mine," Jim said, his voice thick with emotion as he addressed the crowd. "It's ours, a place to remember, to heal, to fight for what's right. Thank you for standing with me." The crowd cheered, many saluting, the flag above them waving proudly. As the sun set, Jim sat on the bench, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the families gather around the statue, their voices a soft hum of gratitude. He thought about the day the fake HOA cops had tried to take the garden, the fear, the anger, the uncertainty. But he also thought about what had come after, the strength of his community, the justice they'd won, the legacy they'd built. "We kept our promise," he whispered, looking at the plaque, the names of his fallen comrades glowing in the fading light. The garden stood as a testament to their sacrifice and to the power of a soldier who refused to let their memory be disrespected. Colonel Jim Carter turned this memorial garden into a symbol of honor, a place where the memory of fallen soldiers lives on. 5 years ago, fake HOA cops thought they could bulldoze this sacred space, disrespecting the sacrifices of those who gave their lives. They didn't know Jim was a retired colonel with 30 years of military strategy and a community of veterans and neighbors who'd fight for him. Now his garden is a beacon of healing, a legacy of justice, and the inspiration for Carter's Law, protecting veterans across the country. This is HOA Karen Files, where we shine a light on the brave who refuse to back down. Have you or someone you know been targeted by a fake HOA? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next story. We'll see you soon, and let's keep honoring those who fight for us. An HOA blocked firefighters from saving a dying man. They had to cut the gate down. Today's story hits hard because it's not just a story. It's a real-life tragedy shared with us by one of our viewers, a former firefighter and EMT who witnessed the devastating consequences of HOA negligence. This is the entrance to Pinewood Estates, a gated community in Georgia where a man's life was lost, not because of a fire, not because of a medical emergency that couldn't be treated, but because of an HOA's arrogance. Firefighters arrived to save 72-year-old Robert Ellis, who was having a heart attack, but the gate was locked, and the HOA had no emergency override. The team had to cut through the gate with a rebar saw to get inside, but it was too late. Robert didn't make it, and now the HOA board is being sued for their negligence. They even had the audacity to sue the fire department for property destruction. This is HOA Karen Files, where we expose the HOAs that put rules over lives. Have you or someone you know been blocked by an HOA during an emergency? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more. Let's dive into how this tragedy unfolded and how justice was served. Robert Ellis, a 72-year-old retired schoolteacher, lived in Pinewood Estates, a gated community in a quiet suburb of Savannah, Georgia. The community was known for its manicured lawns, upscale homes, and strict HOA rules, which Robert had always followed to the letter. He'd moved there 5 years ago after his wife passed away, seeking a peaceful place to spend his retirement. Robert was a kind man, loved by his neighbors for his warm smile and the way he'd sit on his porch every evening, reading history books and waving to kids riding their bikes. He was active in the community, often volunteering to plant flowers along the entrance or organize book drives for the local library. But Robert had a heart condition, congestive heart failure, that required careful monitoring, and he always kept his emergency alert bracelet on, just in case. On a humid July evening, Robert was in his living room, flipping through a biography of Abraham Lincoln, when he felt a sharp pain in his chest. His vision blurred, his breath came in short gasps, and he knew immediately what was happening. He was having a heart attack. With trembling hands, he pressed the button on his alert bracelet, which automatically dialed 911. "I need help," he managed to say, his voice weak as he gave his address to the dispatcher. "Pinewood Estates, please hurry." The dispatcher, a young woman named Sarah, stayed on the line, her voice calm but urgent. "Help is on the way, Mr. Ellis," she said. "Just hold on, we'll be there soon." She dispatched the nearest fire department, Station 12, located just 3 miles away, along with an ambulance from the county EMS. At Station 12, Captain Michael "Mike" Torres, a 45-year-old firefighter with 20 years of experience, was on duty with his team. The alarm blared through the station, the dispatcher's voice crackling over the speaker. "Code 3, possible cardiac arrest, Pinewood Estates, 142, Oak Lane. Elderly male, 72, alert bracelet activated." Mike and his team, Lieutenant Jessica Hayes, a former EMT, and firefighters Chris Nguyen and David Carter, sprang into action, grabbing their gear and piling into the fire truck. The ambulance followed close behind, its sirens wailing as the convoy sped toward Pinewood Estates. "We've got to move fast," Mike said, his hands gripping the wheel, his jaw tight. "Every second counts with a heart attack." Jessica nodded, checking the defibrillator in her bag, her mind racing through the steps of CPR. They'd done this run dozens of times, but something about Pinewood Estates made Mike uneasy. He'd heard stories about their gate. Pinewood Estates was surrounded by a tall wrought iron fence, with a single entrance controlled by a security gate. The gate was operated by a keypad, requiring a code to open, and was designed to keep out unauthorized visitors, as the HOA board often boasted in their newsletters. But there was a problem, one that would prove fatal. Despite state laws requiring gated communities to have an emergency vehicle override, a special key or system that allows first responders to open the gate quickly, Pinewood Estates had no such mechanism. The HOA board, led by President Karen Mitchell, a 60-year-old real estate agent with a reputation for micromanaging, had installed the gate 3 years ago through a cheap contractor to save costs. They'd ignored the contractor's recommendation to include an override system, with Karen dismissing it as unnecessary during a board meeting. "We don't need ambulances and fire trucks coming in here all the time," she'd said, according to the meeting minutes. "It lowers property values." The board had also neglected to inform the local fire department of the gate code, a standard practice for gated communities, leaving first responders with no way to access the neighborhood in an emergency. Mike's fire truck screeched to a stop in front of the gate, the ambulance pulling up behind. The gate loomed before them, its black metal bars unyielding, the keypad glowing faintly in the dusk. Mike jumped out, his boots hitting the pavement, and ran to the keypad, hoping to find an override slot, a standard feature that would accept a universal key carried by all emergency responders in Georgia. But there was nothing, just a numeric keypad and a small speaker for residents to buzz in guests. "You've got to be kidding me," Mike muttered, his heart sinking. He pressed the call button, hoping someone in the security office would answer, but the line was dead. No one was on duty. Jessica joined him, her face pale as she glanced at her watch. "We're losing time," she said, her voice tight. "He's in there, and we can't get to him." Chris and David grabbed a set of bolt cutters from the truck, trying to break the lock on the gate, but the metal was too thick, the cutters barely making a dent. Mike radioed the dispatcher, his voice urgent. "We're at Pinewood Estates. Gates locked. No override. No response from security. We need the code, or we're cutting it down." Sarah, the dispatcher, tried calling the HOA's emergency contact, Karen Mitchell, but the call went straight to voicemail. "I'm sorry, Captain," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I can't get through. Do what you have to do." Mike made the call, his training kicking in. "Get the rebar saw," he told his team. "We're cutting through." David ran back to the truck, grabbing the heavy-duty rebar saw, a gas-powered tool designed to cut through steel. The team worked quickly, sparks flying as the blade bit into the gate's locking bar, the screech of metal echoing through the quiet evening. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the noise, their faces a mix of confusion and concern. "What's going on?" A woman called from her porch, her voice carrying over the sound of the saw. "There's a man having a heart attack," Jessica shouted back, her hands steady as she helped guide the saw. "We can't get in, the gate's locked." The woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, and ran inside to call her neighbors, spreading the word. Inside his home, Robert was fading fast. He'd collapsed onto the floor, his books slipping from his hands, his breath shallow and ragged. The pain in his chest was unbearable, a crushing weight that made it hard to think, hard to move. He thought of his late wife, Margaret, her smile, her laugh, the way she'd always told him to take care of himself. "I'm trying, Maggie," he whispered, his voice barely audible, his eyes fluttering closed. The sound of sirens in the distance gave him a flicker of hope, but it was so far away, so faint. He didn't know if they'd make it in time. Back at the gate, the firefighters finally cut through the locking bar, the metal giving way with a groan. Chris and David pushed the gate open, the heavy bars swinging wide, and the fire truck roared through, the ambulance following close behind. They sped down the winding streets of Pinewood Estates, their sirens blaring, their lights flashing, until they reached 142 Oak Lane. Mike was the first out, his team right behind him, their gear clanking as they ran to the door. It was unlocked. Robert had managed to leave it open in his last moments of consciousness, and they burst inside, finding him on the floor, unresponsive, his pulse faint. Jessica dropped to her knees, starting CPR immediately, her hands pressing rhythmically on Robert's chest. "Come on, sir, stay with us," she said, her voice steady but urgent. Mike set up the defibrillator, attaching the pads to Robert's chest, while Chris and David assisted the paramedics from the ambulance, who'd arrived seconds later with a stretcher. "Clear," Mike shouted, delivering a shock, Robert's body jerking under the current. They worked for 15 minutes, their movements a blur of precision and desperation, but Robert's heart wouldn't restart. The paramedics called it at 7:42 p.m. Robert Ellis was gone. Mike sat back on his heels, his hands trembling, his face pale. He'd lost people before, it came with the job, but this one hit hard. They'd been so close, just 3 miles away, but the gate had cost them precious minutes. Jessica wiped her eyes, her hands still on Robert's chest, her voice a whisper. "We could have saved him." The team sat in silence, the weight of the loss heavy in the room, the sound of the ambulance's radio crackling in the background. Outside, the neighbors gathered, their faces etched with grief, many of them crying as they realized what had happened. Robert was gone, and the HOA's negligence was to blame. The news of Robert Ellis's death spread through Pinewood Estates like wildfire, the community reeling from the loss of a beloved neighbor. The next morning, a small group of residents gathered at Robert's house, placing flowers on his porch, their voices low as they shared memories of the man who'd always had a kind word and a warm smile. "He helped my son with his history project last year," one neighbor, a single mom named Lisa, said, her eyes red from crying. "He was the best of us." Another neighbor, an elderly man named George, shook his head, his voice trembling with anger. "This never should have happened. That gate, it's a death trap. The HOA knew it, and they did nothing." Captain Mike Torres and his team returned to Station 12, their hearts heavy with the weight of the call. Mike sat at his desk, filling out the incident report, his pen moving slowly as he recounted the events, the locked gate, the lack of an override, the desperate minutes spent cutting through the metal. He'd been a firefighter long enough to know that gated communities were required by Georgia law to have an emergency vehicle override, a universal key system that allowed first responders to access the gate quickly. Pinewood Estates had none, and Mike knew that failure had cost Robert his life. He called the county fire marshal, his voice steady but laced with frustration. "We need to investigate this HOA," he said. "They violated state law, and a man died because of it. I want them held accountable." The fire marshal, a no-nonsense woman named Linda Carter, agreed to launch an investigation, coordinating with the Savannah Police Department and the county EMS. She visited Pinewood Estates the next day, meeting with Mike and his team at the gate, which still bore the scars of the rebar saw, jagged cuts in the metal, the locking bar hanging loose. Linda examined the keypad, her expression darkening as she confirmed the absence of an override slot. "This is a clear violation," she said, taking photos of the gate for her report. "They're supposed to have a Knox box system, a slot for a universal key that all first responders carry. There's nothing here, and they didn't even give us the gate code." She interviewed the neighbors, many of whom expressed their outrage, their voices a chorus of grief and anger. "The HOA board is obsessed with control," George told her, his hands shaking. "They care more about property values than people's lives." The HOA board, led by Karen Mitchell, was quick to deflect blame. Karen, a tall woman with a sharp jawline and a penchant for designer suits, called an emergency meeting at the community clubhouse, her voice dripping with indignation as she addressed the residents. "The fire department overreacted," she said, her hands on her hips, her tone dismissive. "They didn't need to cut the gate. They could have called me for the code. This is willful property destruction, and we're not going to stand for it." The residents gasped, their anger boiling over. "A man died, Karen," Lisa shouted, her voice breaking. "Robert needed help, and that gate stopped the firefighters from getting to him. How can you blame them?" Karen's face reddened, but she doubled down, her voice cold. "The gate is there for your safety. It keeps out riffraff. If the fire department had followed protocol, this wouldn't have happened. We're suing them for the damage, and that's final." The board's decision to sue the fire department for willful property destruction sent shockwaves through the community, the residents' outrage reaching a fever pitch. Lisa, George, and a group of neighbors organized a protest outside the clubhouse, holding signs that read, "Justice for Robert," and "HOA killed our neighbor." They shared their story on social media, posting photos of the mangled gate and Robert's porch, now covered in flowers, with captions like, "Pinewood Estates HOA let a man die. Hold them accountable. Hashtag Justice for Robert." The posts went viral, racking up thousands of shares on Facebook and Twitter, with hashtags trending across Georgia. Local news stations, including WDOC 11, picked up the story, interviewing Lisa and George in front of the gate. "The HOA board knew that gate was a problem," George said, his voice trembling with emotion. "They ignored the law, and now Robert's gone. We want justice." The viral attention caught the eye of Robert's daughter, Emily Ellis, a 40-year-old lawyer who lived in Atlanta. Emily had been devastated by her father's death, her grief compounded by the knowledge that he could have been saved. She drove to Savannah the day after the news broke, her hands shaking as she walked into her father's house, the biography of Lincoln still on the floor where he dropped it. She sat on the couch, her father's favorite blanket in her lap, tears streaming down her face as she thought of all the moments they'd never share, holidays, birthdays, the quiet evenings on the porch. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I should have been here." But Emily wasn't just a grieving daughter. She was a lawyer with a fierce sense of justice, and she knew the HOA was to blame. Emily met with Mike and Linda at Station 12, her expression a mix of grief and determination as she reviewed the incident report. "My father didn't have to die," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "The HOA violated state law by not having an override system, and their negligence cost him his life. I'm filing a wrongful death lawsuit against the board, and I want your team to testify." Mike nodded, his jaw tight. "We'll do whatever it takes," he said. "Your father deserved better." Emily also reached out to the neighbors, gathering statements from Lisa, George, and others who'd witnessed the HOA's negligence over the years, complaints about the gate, ignored requests for an override system, Karen's dismissive attitude at board meetings. "We're in this together," Emily told them, her voice strong. "We're going to make sure this never happens again." Back at the fire station, Mike and his team prepared for the HOA's lawsuit, their anger tempered by a quiet resolve. They knew they'd done the right thing. Cutting the gate was the only way to get to Robert, and they'd do it again in a heartbeat. But the HOA's arrogance, their refusal to take responsibility, lit a fire in Mike's chest. He thought of Robert, a man he'd never met but had fought to save, and the daughter he'd left behind. "They're not getting away with this," he said to his team, his voice low but fierce. "We're fighting back, for Robert, for Emily, for every person who might need us in the future." The stage was set for a legal battle that would shake Pinewood Estates to its core. The wrongful death lawsuit filed by Emily Ellis against the Pinewood Estates HOA board sent ripples through the community, the residents grappling with a mix of grief, anger, and hope for justice. Emily worked tirelessly, her law office in Atlanta a flurry of activity as she gathered evidence. Incident reports from the fire department, statements from neighbors, county records showing the HOA's failure to comply with state law, and even the original contract with the gate's installer, which included a recommendation for a Knox-box override system that the board had explicitly rejected. She also hired an expert witness, a fire safety consultant named Dr. Alan Brooks, who testified that the lack of an override system directly contributed to the delay in Robert's treatment, costing him his life. In a cardiac arrest, every minute matters, Dr. Brooks said in his deposition, his voice grave. The 8-minute delay caused by the gate was the difference between life and death. The community rallied around Emily, their support a lifeline in her grief. Lisa organized a candlelight vigil in Robert's honor, held in the community park just outside the gate, where over 100 residents gathered, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. They shared stories of Robert, his love of history, his kindness to their children, the way he'd always bring extra flowers to the park to brighten the space. He was the heart of this neighborhood, George said, his voice breaking as he held his candle high. We failed him, but we won't fail his memory. Emily spoke last, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. My dad loved this community, she said, her hands trembling as she held a photo of Robert smiling on his porch. He deserved to live, to see his grandchildren grow up. The HOA took that from him, from all of us. We're fighting for justice, not just for him, but for everyone who might need help in the future. The crowd cheered, their candles a sea of light in the darkness, their resolve unshakable. The viral attention continued to grow, with the hashtag Justice for Robert trending nationwide, shared by firefighters, EMTs, and families who'd experienced similar issues with gated communities. A group of firefighters from a neighboring county started a petition, Require Emergency Overrides Now, calling for stricter enforcement of override laws in Georgia, which gained 10,000 signatures in a week. The story caught the attention of national news outlets like NBC Nightly News, which ran a segment on Robert's death, interviewing Emily and Mike in front of the mangled gate. This isn't just about one man, Mike said, his voice steady. It's about every person who might need us. Gated communities can't put profits over lives. The segment sparked a wave of outrage, with viewers flooding the HOA's office with calls and emails, demanding accountability. The HOA board, meanwhile, doubled down on their lawsuit against the fire department, claiming the damage to the gate, estimated at $15,000, constituted willful property destruction. Karen Mitchell gave an interview to a local paper, her tone defiant as she defended the board's actions. The fire department acted recklessly, she said, her arms crossed, her eyes cold. They should have waited for the code. We're a secure community. That gate is there to protect our residents, not to harm them. The interview backfired spectacularly, with readers flooding the paper's website with comments like, "She's delusional," and "A man died," and "She's worried about a gate." The board's arrogance only fueled the community's anger, their protests growing louder, their signs now reading, "Karen must go," and "HOA murderers." Emily's lawsuit gained traction, with the court scheduling a hearing for early September, just 2 months after Robert's death. She prepared meticulously, her nights spent poring over legal documents, her days meeting with witnesses and experts. She visited Pinewood Estates often, walking through her father's house, touching the things he'd loved, his books, his gardening tools, the rocking chair on the porch. Each visit was a mix of pain and purpose, her grief driving her to fight harder. She met with Mike and his team, their bond growing as they shared their determination to hold the HOA accountable. "You did everything you could," she told Mike, her voice soft but firm. "Now it's my turn to fight for him." The fire department, meanwhile, prepared for their own legal battle. Their lawyer, a pro bono attorney named David Harper, who'd lost a brother to a similar incident years ago, building a defense that highlighted the HOA's negligence. David gathered statements from other fire departments in the area, many of whom had faced similar issues with Pinewood Estates, their calls delayed by the gate, their patients put at risk. This isn't the first time, David told Mike, his voice grim. They've been warned before, and they did nothing. They're going to pay for that. Mike nodded, his jaw tight, his mind replaying the moment they'd found Robert on the floor, the life already gone from his eyes. He thought of his own father, a retired firefighter who'd taught him the importance of every second, every life. We're not just fighting for Robert, Mike said, his voice low. We're fighting for every call we'll ever get. The community's grief turned to action, with residents organizing a letter-writing campaign to the county commissioners, demanding stricter oversight of HOAs and mandatory inspections for emergency access systems. They also started a GoFundMe to help Emily with legal fees, raising $10,000 in a week, with donations from firefighters, EMTs, and families across the country. We're with you, Emily, wrote a donor from California, a paramedic who'd faced a similar gate issue. Don't let them win. Emily used the funds to hire a private investigator who uncovered emails between Karen and the board, showing they'd ignored multiple complaints about the gate over the years, dismissing them as overreactions. The emails were a bombshell, proving the board's willful negligence, and Emily knew they'd be key in court. As the hearing approached, the community held a memorial service for Robert, gathering in the park where they'd held the vigil, their voices raised in song as they honored his memory. Emily stood at the front, a small urn with her father's ashes in her hands, her voice steady as she spoke. My dad believed in this community, she said, her eyes sweeping over the crowd. He believed in kindness, in helping others, in doing what's right. We're going to do right by him. We're going to make sure his death wasn't in vain. The crowd applauded, their hands clapping in unison, their candles glowing in the night, a symbol of their unity and their fight for justice. The courtroom in Savannah was packed on the day of the hearing, with residents, firefighters, and reporters filling the seats, their faces a mix of anticipation and anger. Emily Ellis stood at the plaintiff's table, her suit crisp, her expression a mix of grief and determination, her father's photo on the table in front of her. Across the room, Karen Mitchell and the HOA board sat with their lawyer, a slick attorney named Richard Baxter, who'd built a career defending HOAs in liability cases. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Margaret Evans, entered the room, her presence commanding as she took her seat, her eyes scanning the crowd. This is a case of wrongful death and negligence, she said, her voice clear. Let's begin. Emily's case was airtight, her evidence meticulously presented. She called Mike Torres to the stand, his firefighter's uniform a stark contrast to the courtroom's formality, his voice steady as he recounted the night of Robert's death. We arrived at the gate within 4 minutes of the call, he said, his hands clasped in front of him. But there was no override system, no way to get in. We had to cut through the gate with a rebar saw. It took 8 minutes, and by the time we reached Mr. Ellis, it was too late. The jury listened intently, their faces a mix of shock and sympathy, several of them wiping tears as Mike described finding Robert on the floor, their desperate attempts to save him. If we'd had access, we could have saved him, Mike said, his voice breaking. That gate cost him his life. Dr. Alan Brooks, the fire safety expert, testified next, his analysis damning. Georgia law requires gated communities to have an emergency override system, he said, holding up a copy of the statute. Pinewood Estates had none, and they failed to provide the gate code to first responders, a standard practice. The 8-minute delay directly contributed to Mr. Ellis's death. Emily presented the emails from the HOA board, her voice steady as she read Karen's words aloud. We don't need an override system. It's unnecessary. It'll just encourage emergency vehicles to come in and lower our property values. The jury gasped, their anger palpable, the board's negligence laid bare. The HOA's defense was weak, their lawyer, Richard Baxter, attempting to shift blame to the fire department. The firefighters acted recklessly, he argued, his voice smooth but unconvincing. They should have waited for the gate code. Cutting the gate was unnecessary and caused significant damage. But the argument fell flat, the jury's expressions hardening as they listened. Karen took the stand, her demeanor cold and unapologetic, her answers evasive as Emily cross-examined her. Did you know about the state law requiring an override system? Emily asked, her voice sharp. Karen hesitated, her eyes darting to her lawyer. I wasn't aware, she said, her voice faltering. But the gate was there to protect our residents. Emily held up the emails, her voice rising. You were aware. You rejected the override system because you thought it would lower property values. You put profits over lives, and my father died because of it. The courtroom was silent, the weight of Emily's words hanging in the air, Karen's face pale as she sat down. The HOA's lawsuit against the fire department was heard in the same session, a decision Judge Evans made to streamline the proceedings. David Harper, the fire department's lawyer, presented a robust defense, calling other first responders to testify about their own struggles with Pinewood Estates Gate. This wasn't the first time. A paramedic named Sarah testified, her voice steady. I've been delayed by that gate 3 times in the past year. Patients suffered because of it. David also presented the fire marshal's report, which confirmed the HOA's violation of state law and highlighted the urgency of the situation. Robert's life was on the line, and cutting the gate was the only option. My clients acted to save a life, David said in his closing argument, his voice passionate. The HOA's negligence created this tragedy, and now they have the audacity to sue the very people who tried to help. This is an outrage, and it cannot stand. Judge Evans deliberated for just 2 hours, her decision swift and decisive. In the wrongful death case, she ruled in favor of Emily, finding the HOA board liable for Robert's death due to their negligence. The evidence is clear, she said, her voice firm. The Pinewood Estates HOA violated state law by failing to install an emergency override system, and their willful negligence directly contributed to Mr. Ellis's death. I award the plaintiff $2 million in damages, to be paid by the HOA board, and I order the immediate installation of a compliant override system. The courtroom erupted in cheers, Emily collapsing into her chair, tears streaming down her face as Lisa and George hugged her, their relief palpable. In the HOA's lawsuit against the fire department, Judge Evans was even more scathing. This claim is not only baseless, it is an affront to justice, she said, her eyes locked on Karen and the board. The fire department acted in the best interest of a dying man, and you dare to sue them for doing their job? I dismiss this case with prejudice, and I order the HOA to cover all legal costs for the fire department, $50,000 in total. Furthermore, you are required to replace the gate with a new system installed by a licensed security contractor that complies with all state laws, including a Knox box override. This court will not tolerate such reckless disregard for human life. The residents cheered again, their applause deafening, while Karen and the board sat in stunned silence, their faces pale, their arrogance shattered. The ruling was a victory, but it was bittersweet for Emily. She stood outside the courthouse, the photo of her father in her hands, her voice steady as she spoke to the press. "This is for you, Dad," she said, her eyes shining with tears. "We got justice, but I'd give anything to have you back." Mike and his team stood beside her, their uniforms a symbol of their shared fight, their hands on her shoulders in silent support. The community gathered around, their signs now reading, "Justice served," and "Thank you, Emily," their voices raised in celebration of a victory that would protect them all. In the aftermath of the trial, Pinewood Estates underwent a transformation, the community coming together to heal from the tragedy and ensure it never happened again. The HOA board was forced to comply with Judge Evans's ruling, hiring a licensed security contractor to install a new gate system, a state-of-the-art setup with a Knox box override, a keypad with an emergency code provided to all first responders, and a 24/7 security officer to respond to calls. The installation cost the HOA $200,000, a price that included removing the old gate, rewiring the electrical system, and adding new safety features like a backup generator to ensure the gate would open during power outages. The residents watched as the old gate was torn down, their cheers echoing through the neighborhood, a symbolic end to the board's reign of negligence. Karen Mitchell and the board faced a reckoning, their reputations in tatters after the trial. The residents, empowered by the victory, called for a special election to remove them, their votes unanimous as they replaced the board with new members, Lisa, George, and a retired firefighter named Tom, who'd lived in Pinewood Estates for a decade. "We're here to put people first," Lisa said at the first meeting of the new board, her voice strong. No more gates, no more rules that hurt our neighbors. This is a community, not a prison. The new board implemented a series of reforms, including regular safety audits, a direct line to the fire department, and a fund to help residents with medical alert systems, ensuring that no one would ever be left helpless again. Emily used the $2 million from the lawsuit to start a foundation in her father's name, the Robert Ellis Safety Fund, dedicated to advocating for emergency access in gated communities. The fund partnered with firefighters and EMTs across the country, providing grants to install override systems in neighborhoods that couldn't afford them, and lobbying for stricter laws to enforce compliance. My dad's death was preventable, Emily said at the fund's launch, held in the park where the vigil had taken place, the new gate gleaming in the background. We're making sure no other family has to go through this. The fund's first grant went to a small gated community in Florida, where a similar gate issue had delayed an ambulance, helping them install a Knox box system that saved a child's life just months later. The trial's impact reached far beyond Pinewood Estates, sparking a national conversation about emergency access in gated communities. The Require Emergency Overrides Now petition led to new legislation in Georgia, dubbed Roberts Law, which mandated annual inspections of override systems, with heavy fines for noncompliance, up to $50,000 per violation. Similar laws were proposed in 15 other states, with advocacy groups using Robert's story to push for change, their flyers featuring a photo of him smiling on his porch, the words, "Don't let this happen again," in bold letters. Fire departments across the country began offering free training sessions for HOAs, teaching them how to work with first responders, their classes packed with board members eager to avoid Pinewood Estates' fate. Mike and his team at Station 12 became advocates in their own right, speaking at fire safety conferences about the importance of emergency access, their voices a powerful reminder of the stakes. "We lost Robert, but we saved others," Mike said at a conference in Atlanta, his uniform crisp, his eyes shining with pride. Every gate we open, every life we save, is part of his legacy. The team also started a scholarship in Robert's name, awarded to high school students pursuing careers in firefighting or EMS. Their first recipient, a young woman named Sarah, who'd been inspired by the story to become a paramedic. "I want to make a difference, like you did," she told Mike at the award ceremony, her voice trembling with emotion. Mike smiled, his hand on her shoulder, his heart full. The community of Pinewood Estates honored Robert's memory in their own way, dedicating a small garden in the park to him, with a plaque that read, "In memory of Robert Ellis, a neighbor, a friend, a life worth saving." They planted his favorite flowers, tulips and daisies, around the plaque, their colors bright against the green grass, a place for reflection and healing. On the first anniversary of his death, they gathered in the garden, their voices raised in song, their candles glowing in the night. Emily at the center with her father's urn in her hands. "You're still with us, Dad," she said, her voice soft, her eyes on the plaque. "We'll never stop fighting for you." For Emily, the fight for justice had been a journey of grief and healing, her father's memory a guiding light. She moved to Savannah, buying a small house just outside Pinewood Estates, where she could be close to the community that had loved her father. She volunteered at the local library, continuing his book drives, and often sat in the garden, reading the history books he'd loved, her heart full of his presence. "We did it, Dad," she whispered, her fingers tracing the words on the plaque, the new gate a symbol of the change they'd fought for. Pinewood Estates was no longer a place of tragedy. It was a place of hope, a testament to the power of a community that refused to let a life be lost in vain. Robert Ellis's death was a tragedy that never should have happened, but his daughter Emily and the community of Pinewood Estates turned their grief into a movement for change. They took down an HOA that put rules over lives, won justice in the courtroom, and inspired Robert's Law to protect others across the country. Now, this gate opens for all, first responders, neighbors, anyone who needs help, because of their fight. This is HOA Karen Files, where we shine a light on the heroes who stand up to injustice. Have you or someone you know been blocked by an HOA during an emergency? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next story. We'll see you soon. And let's keep fighting for a world where no gate stands in the way of saving a life. Fake HOA cops find a widow for her husband's flag. Her Navy SEAL's son fought back. This is the home of Margaret Maggie Thompson, a 65-year-old widow in Florida who flies this flag to honor her late husband, a Vietnam War veteran who gave his life for this country. But a group of fake HOA cops showed up, called the flag a violation, and fined her $3,000, threatening to rip it down. They didn't know Maggie's son, David, is a Navy SEAL with 15 years of elite training, and he wasn't about to let his father's memory be disrespected. This is HOA Karen Files, where we expose the bullies who target the brave. Ever had an HOA disrespect something sacred to you? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more. Let's dive into how David turned the tables on these scammers and fought for his mom. Margaret Maggie Thompson lived in a quaint bungalow in a quiet neighborhood in Pensacola, Florida, a place she'd called home for over 40 years. The house was small but well-loved, with a wraparound porch, a garden of wildflowers, and a flagpole in the front yard that had stood for decades. On that flagpole, Maggie flew 2 flags. The American flag, its stars and stripes a symbol of her husband's service, and a gold star flag below it, a tribute to his sacrifice. Her husband, Captain Robert Thompson, had been a Marine who died in Vietnam in 1971, leaving Maggie a widow at 27 with a newborn son, David. Robert had been her high school sweetheart, a kind man with a booming laugh and a fierce love for his country. "I'll be back before you know it," he'd told her before his last deployment, kissing her forehead as she held baby David in her arms. But he never came home. Killed in action during a firefight, his body returned to her in a flag-draped coffin. Maggie had raised David on her own, working 2 jobs as a nurse to provide for him, all while keeping Robert's memory alive. She'd tell David stories about his father, how he'd loved fishing on the Gulf, how he'd sing off-key to make her laugh, how he dreamed of teaching his son to play baseball. The flagpole was a sacred part of their home, a place where Maggie would stand every morning, raising the flag with care, her hands steady despite the arthritis that had crept into her joints. "This is for your dad," she'd say to David, her voice soft but firm. "He gave everything for us." David, now 45, had grown up under that flag, its shadow a constant reminder of the father he'd never known but loved deeply through his mother's stories. David had followed in his father's footsteps, joining the Navy at 18 and becoming a SEAL, one of the military's most elite operatives. He'd served 15 years, completing missions in Iraq, Afghanistan, and classified operations around the globe, earning a Silver Star for his bravery under fire. Now retired, David lived in Virginia, working as a security consultant, but he visited his mother often, their bond unbreakable. Maggie was his rock, the woman who'd taught him resilience, honor, and the importance of family. "You're my hero, Mom," he'd tell her, hugging her tightly, her small frame dwarfed by his 6 feet 4 inches stature. On a sunny October morning, Maggie was in her garden, pruning her wildflowers, the flag snapping in the breeze above her. She wore a faded sundress and a straw hat, her hands moving with the care of someone who'd tended the same earth for decades. She was thinking about Robert, as she often did, when a white SUV pulled into her driveway, its doors emblazoned with a logo that read Gulf Breeze HOA. 3 people stepped out, 2 men and a woman, all wearing Navy vests with HOA compliance in bold letters. The leader, a man in his 40s named Stephen Carter, carried a clipboard, his expression stern as he approached Maggie. "Mrs. Thompson, your flagpole is in violation of Gulf Breeze HOA regulations," he said, handing her a letter stamped with a fake logo. "It's an unauthorized structure, and the gold star flag isn't allowed. You owe a $3,000 fine, payable in 48 hours, or we'll remove it." Maggie's heart sank, her hands trembling as she took the letter, her eyes filling with tears. "This flag is for my husband," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "He died for this country, and there's no HOA here. I've lived in this house for 40 years, and we've never had one." Stephen smirked, his eyes cold. "Gulf Breeze HOA was established last year," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "You're under our jurisdiction now. Pay the fine, or we'll be back to take it down." The woman, a 30-something named Jessica, snapped photos of the flagpole with her phone, while the other man, a burly guy named Mike, walked over to the flagpole and tugged at the rope, testing its stability, his disrespect evident in his careless movements. "This thing's an eyesore," he muttered, loud enough for Maggie to hear. Maggie's hands clenched into fists, her grief turning to anger. She thought of Robert, the man who'd given his life for their freedom, the man whose memory she'd honored every day for 53 years. "Get off my property," she said, her voice low but commanding, the kind of tone that had once calmed a hospital ward during a crisis. "Now." The group laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the quiet morning. "You've got 48 hours, lady," Stephen said, before they got back in their SUV and drove off, leaving Maggie standing in her yard, the letter crumpled in her hand. She walked to the flagpole, her steps heavy, and placed her hand on the cold metal, tears streaming down her face. "They're not touching your flag, Robert," she whispered, her voice a vow. "I won't let them." That evening, Maggie called David, her voice trembling as she told him what had happened. "They want to take down your father's flag," she said, her words breaking with emotion. "They fined me $3,000, David. I don't have that kind of money." David's jaw tightened, his military training kicking in as he listened, his mind already strategizing. "I'm coming home, Mom," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "No one disrespects Dad's memory. Or you. I'll handle this." He booked the next flight to Pensacola, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and determination. The fake HOA cops had no idea who they were dealing with, a Navy SEAL who'd faced enemies far more dangerous than they could imagine. David Thompson arrived in Pensacola the next morning, his flight landing just as the sun rose over the Gulf. He was a towering figure, 6 feet 4 inches, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and a scar across his left eyebrow from a mission in Afghanistan. He wore a black t-shirt, cargo pants, and combat boots, his movements precise and controlled, the kind of discipline that came from years of elite training. He drove straight to his mother's house, his heart aching as he saw her waiting on the porch, her small frame wrapped in a shawl, her eyes red from crying. "David," she said, her voice breaking as she ran to him, her arms wrapping around him in a tight hug. "I'm so glad you're here." David held her close, his jaw tight, his protective instincts in overdrive. "I've got you, Mom," he said, his voice steady. "They're not touching Dad's flag." Inside, Maggie showed David the letter from Gulf Breeze HOA, her hands trembling as she pointed out the $3,000 fine and the 48-hour deadline. David studied the letter with the same intensity he'd once used to analyze enemy intel, his eyes narrowing as he noticed the details: the cheap paper, the generic email address, compliance@gulfbreezehoa.org, mailtocompliance@gulfbreezehoa.org, the lack of a physical address. "This isn't a real HOA," he said, his voice low but certain. "I've seen scams like this before, shakedowns targeting vulnerable people. They picked the wrong house." He called a friend from his SEAL days, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Carter, who now worked in cybersecurity for a private firm in D.C. "Ryan, I need a deep dive on a fake HOA, Gulf Breeze HOA, David said, his tone clipped. "They're targeting my mom, and I want to know who's behind it." Ryan got to work, tracing the domain and financial records, while David set up a perimeter around the house, his military instincts kicking in. He installed small security cameras in the trees around the yard, their lenses trained on the flagpole, and set up a motion sensor to alert him if anyone approached. "If they come back, we'll catch them on tape," he told Maggie, his voice calm but firm. Maggie nodded, her trust in her son absolute, her heart swelling with pride as she watched him work. "You're so much like your father," she said, her voice soft. David smiled, his hand on her shoulder. "I learned from the best, both of you." Ryan called back that afternoon, his findings explosive. "Gulf Breeze HOA is a front," he said, his voice urgent. "The domain was registered 3 months ago to a shell company, Coastal Ventures LLC, with a P.O. box in Miami. Coastal Ventures is linked to a developer, Sunshine Realty Group, known for buying up properties in Pensacola to build condos. They've been targeting older homeowners, trying to force them out with fake fines. Your mom's house is on a prime lot, waterfront access, perfect for their next project." David's jaw tightened, his anger simmering. "They're trying to scare her into selling," he said, his voice a growl. "Not on my watch." David reached out to the local police, speaking with Officer Maria Lopez, a 35-year-old cop who'd served in the National Guard and respected veterans like Maggie. "We've had complaints about fake HOAs in the area," Maria told him, her voice serious. "But we need hard evidence to move on them. If you can catch them in the act, we'll be ready." David nodded, his plan taking shape. He also called a few of his SEAL buddies who lived nearby. Chief Petty Officer Jake Miller and Senior Chief Tom Hayes, both of whom were eager to help. "We're in," Jake said, his voice gruff. No one messes with a Gold Star family. The team arrived that evening, their presence a quiet show of force, their loyalty to David and his mother unwavering. The next morning, as the 48-hour deadline approached, David and his team were ready. Maggie stood on the porch, her hands clasped, her eyes on the flagpole, the American and Gold Star flags flying proudly. David stood beside her, his posture straight, his eyes scanning the street, his team positioned strategically around the property, Jake and Tom in plain clothes, blending into the neighborhood, their radios crackling with updates. White SUV approaching. Jake's voice came through David's earpiece. 3 occupants. "It's them." David's jaw tightened, his training kicking in. He signaled to Maggie to stay on the porch, his voice calm but firm. "Stay here, Mom. I've got this." Stephen, Jessica, and Mike stepped out of the SUV, their vests on, their expressions smug. Stephen carried a megaphone, his voice booming as he approached the yard. "Time's up, Mrs. Thompson," he shouted. "Pay the $3,000, or we're taking that flagpole down, starting with that Gold Star flag." Mike grabbed a pair of bolt cutters, moving toward the flagpole as if to cut the rope, while Jessica started taking more photos, her camera flashing. David stepped forward, his presence commanding, his voice low and dangerous, the kind of tone that had once stopped enemies in their tracks. "You're on camera," he said, pointing to the trees where the cameras were hidden. "And I know you're not a real HOA. Coastal Ventures, Sunshine Realty, I've got your whole operation figured out. You're scammers, and you're not touching my father's flag." Stephen's smirk faltered, his confidence shaken by David's intensity, the sheer size of the man towering over him. "You can't prove anything," he said, his voice less certain. That's when Officer Lopez and her team moved in, sirens blaring as 2 police cars surrounded the SUV. "Pensacola PD," Maria shouted, her badge out. "You're under arrest for extortion, vandalism, and impersonating an HOA." Maggie watched from the porch, her hands over her mouth, tears of relief streaming down her face as Stephen, Jessica, and Mike were handcuffed, their smug expressions replaced with panic. David stood by the flagpole, his arms crossed, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. "You picked the wrong family to mess with," he said, his voice low. The cameras had captured everything, and David knew this was just the beginning of the fight. With Stephen, Jessica, and Mike in custody, Officer Maria Lopez and the Pensacola Police Department began unraveling the scam. The footage from David's cameras was damning, showing the group's threats and Mike's attempt to cut down the flagpole, a clear act of vandalism. Ryan Carter, David's cybersecurity friend, sent over his findings on Coastal Ventures LLC, linking it to Sunshine Realty Group, a developer with a history of aggressive land acquisition tactics. The police raided Coastal Ventures' P.O. box in Miami, uncovering a trove of evidence: fake HOA letters, lists of targeted properties, and financial records showing over $40,000 in extorted fines from homeowners across Pensacola. The operation was led by a man named Victor Russo, a 50-year-old with a rap sheet for fraud, who'd partnered with Sunshine Realty to clear land for a luxury condo project. David's confrontation with the fake HOA cops had been live-streamed by a neighbor, a teenager named Ethan who'd posted the video to TikTok with the caption, "Navy SEAL shuts down fake HOA trying to take down a Gold Star flag. #Justice for Maggie." The video went viral, racking up 6 million views in 24 hours, shared across platforms by veterans groups, military families, and patriotic organizations. Hashtags like #Justice for Maggie and #Protect the Flag trended nationwide, with comments flooding in. "This is outrageous. How dare they? David is a hero. We need to protect our Gold Star families." A local news station, where ABC3 picked up the story, interviewing Maggie and David in their front yard, the flagpole in the background. "This flag is for my husband, Robert," Maggie said. her voice steady but emotional. He gave his life for this country. These scammers thought they could disrespect his memory. They were wrong. The viral attention brought more victims forward. Over 15 homeowners in Pensacola reported similar experiences with Gulf Breeze HOA, including a 70-year-old man named Mr. Carter, who'd paid $1,500 to avoid losing his shed, and a single mom who'd been harassed into selling her home after fake fines for her kids' trampoline. They kept coming back, the mom told Ware, her voice shaking. I had no choice. David's heart ached as he heard their stories, his resolve hardening. He hosted a meeting at his mother's house, inviting the victims to share their experiences, the flagpole a fitting backdrop for their collective fight. We're not just saving this flag, David told them, his voice strong. We're saving our homes, our memories, our community. The neighbors nodded, their faces a mix of anger and hope, ready to stand with David. Ryan's investigation uncovered a larger network. Sunshine Realty Group was part of a conglomerate, Suncoast Development, which had similar operations in 3 other states, Texas, South Carolina, and Alabama. This is bigger than Pensacola, Ryan told David over the phone, his voice urgent. Victor Russo is just a middleman. Suncoast is the real player. They've been doing this for years, targeting veterans, widows, anyone they think won't fight back. David's jaw tightened, his military mind already strategizing. Then we take it to the feds, he said. He called a contact at the FBI, a former SEAL teammate named Agent Chris Sullivan, who worked in the white-collar crime division. Chris, I've got a case for you, David said, sending over Ryan's files. These guys are preying on Gold Star families. They need to be stopped. Chris promised to escalate the case, coordinating with the Pensacola PD to build a federal indictment. The community support for Maggie grew stronger with every passing day. Veterans groups across Florida rallied, organizing a Stand for the Flag event in Maggie's front yard, where over 80 veterans showed up in uniform, saluting the flag and sharing stories of their own fallen comrades. The event was live-streamed on Facebook, drawing thousands of viewers, many of whom donated to a GoFundMe set up by Ethan to help Maggie with legal fees. The campaign raised $15,000, with donations from as far away as California and New York, where veterans who'd heard Maggie's story sent messages of support. My dad was a Gold Star dad, too, wrote a donor from New York. Thank you for fighting for them. Maggie used the money to hire a lawyer, ensuring the scammers would face justice. Back in the yard, Maggie stood by the flagpole, her hands on the rope, raising the flag as she did every morning. David stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. The neighbors gathered around, watching in silence, their presence a quiet show of support. This is for you, Robert, Maggie said, her voice thick with emotion, the flag reaching the top, the Gold Star flag below it glowing in the sunlight. The group shared a moment of silence, the flag above them waving gently in the breeze. David knew the fight wasn't over, but he also knew he wasn't alone. The legal battle against Coastal Ventures and Sunshine Realty Group moved swiftly, thanks to the evidence David and his team had gathered. The Pensacola PD, working with the FBI, raided Sunshine Realty's headquarters in Miami, seizing computers, financial records, and email chains that detailed the scam. The evidence was overwhelming. Victor Russo had been running the operation for 18 months, extorting over $80,000 from homeowners across Florida, with Sunshine Realty taking a cut of the profits to fund their condo project. The FBI expanded the investigation, uncovering Suncoast Development's operations in 3 other states, leading to a federal indictment for racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. David's story became a rallying cry for veterans and military families across the country. The viral TikTok video of the confrontation, combined with the Where ABC 3 News segment, caught the attention of national outlets like Fox News and CNN, with headlines like Navy SEAL defends Gold Star mom from fake HOA scam and veteran son fights for father's flag. David was invited to speak at a Veterans of Foreign Wars (VFW) convention in Orlando, where he shared his story with a crowd of 400 veterans. They thought they could disrespect my father's memory, he said, his voice echoing through the hall, the flagpole from his mother's yard projected on a screen behind him. But we showed them what happens when you mess with a Gold Star family. The audience gave him a standing ovation, many saluting as David stepped off the stage, his chest tight with emotion. Back in Pensacola, the community turned Maggie's flagpole into a symbol of resistance. Local veterans groups organized weekly visits, bringing their families to pay respects at the flagpole, the Gold Star flag becoming a pilgrimage site for those who'd lost loved ones in service. A group of high school students, inspired by David's story, started a Gold Star Stories project, interviewing Maggie and other local Gold Star families to document their stories, which they published in a book sold to raise money for veterans charities. David and Maggie taught us what honor looks like. One of the students, a 16-year-old named Sarah, told where during a follow-up story. We want to make sure no one forgets. The book raised $4,000, which Maggie donated to a local VFW post, helping them fund a scholarship for children of veterans. The trial against Victor Russo was a media frenzy, with David testifying as the key witness. He sat on the stand, his posture straight, his sealed trident pin on his jacket, his voice steady as he recounted the day of the confrontation. They threatened to tear down my father's flag, he said, his eyes locked on Victor, who sat at the defense table, his face pale. They disrespected the memory of a man who died for this country. I couldn't let that stand. The prosecution played the footage from David's cameras, the jury watching in silence as Mike approached the flagpole with bolt cutters, Stephen's threats booming through the megaphone. The evidence was irrefutable, and after a 2-day trial, the jury found Victor guilty on all counts, sentencing him to 10 years in prison. Stephen, Jessica, and Mike took plea deals, testifying against Victor in exchange for 3-year sentences each, with orders to pay restitution to the victims. Sunshine Realty settled a civil lawsuit for $2 million, with the money distributed among the victims. Maggie used her share to establish a small fund for Gold Star families in Pensacola, naming it the Robert Thompson Memorial Fund. I want to help others who've lost what I've lost, she said at the fund's launch, cutting the ribbon with a pair of ceremonial scissors, the flagpole in the background. The fund awarded its first grant, a $1,500 stipend, to a young widow whose husband had died in Afghanistan, helping her pay for her child's preschool. Thank you, Maggie, the widow said, hugging her, her eyes shining with gratitude. The aftermath of the trial had a ripple effect. Suncoast Development was hit with a $4 million fine, its assets seized to compensate victims across the country, and the FBI's investigation led to dozens of arrests in other states. Lawmakers in Florida introduced a bill called Thompson's Law, making it a felony to impersonate an HOA with intent to defraud, with specific protections for veterans and Gold Star families. David and Maggie Thompson showed us what's at stake, a state representative said at a press conference, holding up a photo of Maggie by the flagpole. We're fighting for every flag, every memory, every family out there. In the years that followed, Maggie's flagpole became a beacon of honor and resilience, not just for Pensacola, but for Gold Star families across the country. The flagpole grew in significance, with Maggie adding a small plaque at its base, engraved with Robert's name and the words, "In honor of Captain Robert Thompson, a hero remembered." Each raising of the flag was a ceremony, with Maggie and the community gathering to share stories, the American and Gold Star flags flying proudly, their colors a testament to the cost of freedom. The plaque became a place for reflection, where Gold Star families would visit, leaving flowers and notes, their grief met with understanding and support. David's story inspired a wave of activism among veterans groups, who used his fight to advocate for stronger protections against real estate scams targeting military families. The VFW launched a national campaign, Protect Our Flags, distributing flyers with tips on spotting fake HOAs and reporting fraud, with Maggie's flagpole as the centerpiece. David and Maggie Thompson fought for a Gold Star family's honor. The campaign's slogan read, "Now we fight for them, and for every veteran." The campaign led to new laws in 8 states, with Thompson's Law becoming a model for legislation nationwide. Advocacy groups for widows also joined the cause, using Maggie's story to highlight the vulnerability of older homeowners, ensuring that protections extended to all. The community around Maggie's house became a family, their bond forged in the fight to save the flag. Neighbors started a Gold Star Day, where they'd volunteer to maintain Maggie's garden, planting new wildflowers, cleaning the plaque, and raising the flag, their kids learning about Robert's sacrifice as they worked. The high school students who'd started the Gold Star Stories project expanded it, creating a podcast where they interviewed Gold Star families across Florida, their stories reaching thousands of listeners. Maggie and David showed us the power of standing up, Sarah said on the podcast's first episode, her voice clear and confident. They taught us to honor the past by fighting for the future. Maggie, now 68, continued to tend her garden, her hands slower, but her spirit as strong as ever. On the 5th anniversary of the incident, she held a special ceremony, inviting the community, David's SEAL team, Officer Lopez, and the families of other Gold Star members. The yard was packed, with over 150 people gathered, the flagpole at the center, the flags in full glory. They unveiled a new addition, a small bench beside the flagpole, a gift from the VFW, with a plaque that read, "In honor of Maggie and David Thompson, Defenders of Valor." "This flag isn't just mine," Maggie said, her voice thick with emotion as she addressed the crowd. "It's ours, a place to remember, to heal, to fight for what's right. Thank you for standing with us." The crowd cheered, many saluting, the flags above them waving proudly. As the sun set, Maggie sat on the bench, a cup of tea in hand, watching the families gather around the flagpole, their voices a soft hum of gratitude. David sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his heart full. He thought about the day the fake HOA cops had tried to take the flag, the fear in his mother's voice, the anger in his chest, the uncertainty. But he also thought about what had come after, the strength of their community, the justice they'd won, the legacy they'd built. "We kept our promise, Dad," he whispered, looking at the plaque, the name of his father glowing in the fading light. The flagpole stood as a testament to Robert's sacrifice and to the power of a family that refused to let his memory be disrespected. Maggie Thompson's flagpole stands tall, a symbol of honor, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of a Gold Star family. 5 years ago, fake HOA cops thought they could tear down this sacred tribute to her late husband, a Vietnam War hero, fining her $3,000 and threatening her home. They didn't know her son, David, a Navy SEAL, would step in, expose their scam, and inspire Thompson's Law to protect veterans nationwide. Now, this flag flies forever, a legacy of justice and love. This is HOA Karen Files, where we shine a light on the brave who refuse to back down. Have you or someone you know been targeted by a fake HOA? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next story. We'll see you soon, and let's keep honoring those who fight for us. My name's Tom Rivera, a 50-year-old Army vet who served 3 tours in Afghanistan. This is Max, my therapy dog. He's the reason I can get through the day, the reason I'm still here after PTSD nearly broke me. But a group of fake HOA cops showed up, called Max Dangerous, and fined me $4,000, threatening to take him away. I was ready to fight, but after all I've been through, I wasn't sure I had the strength, until my neighbor, Dr. Elena Martinez, stepped in, exposed their scam, and turned this into a fight for all veterans. This is my story, told on HOA Karen Files. If you've ever had an HOA target something that keeps you going, tell me in the comments. I'll read everyone. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more. Let me take you through how we saved Max and found justice. I'm Tom Rivera, 50 years old, and I've carried the weight of war for most of my life. I served 3 tours in Afghanistan with the Army, starting back in the early 2000s, and I've got the scars to prove it. Both the ones you can see, like the shrapnel marks on my left leg from an IED explosion in 2005, and the ones you can't, like the PTSD that's haunted me since I left the service in 2010. I earned a Purple Heart for that explosion, but it came at a cost. My best friend didn't make it out of that firefight, and the memories of his screams, the explosions, the chaos, they still wake me up at night, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding like I'm back in the desert. I moved to this quiet neighborhood in Tucson, Arizona, 10 years ago, hoping the stillness would help me find some peace, but for a long time, I was just surviving, not living. That all changed in 2020 when I adopted Max, a 4-year-old golden retriever, through a veterans therapy dog program. I was 45 then, and I'd been struggling hard, couldn't sleep, couldn't handle crowds, Couldn't even hear a car backfire without hitting the deck in my mind. Max came into my life like a beacon of light. He's got these amber eyes that seem to see right through me, like he knows every dark corner of my soul and loves me anyway. He was trained to sense my anxiety, and he'd nudge my hand when a panic attack hit, press his warm body against my legs to ground me, his steady breathing pulling me back from the edge. I'd sit on my patio every evening, Max at my feet, watching the sunset over the desert plants in my backyard, cacti, agave, the kind of rugged beauty that reminded me I could still find something worth holding on to. I'd talk to him about things I couldn't tell anyone else. Memories of the war, the guilt I carried for surviving when others didn't. You get me, don't you, boy? I'd say, scratching his ears, and he'd tilt his head, his tail thumping softly. Max gave me a reason to keep going. He was my anchor. My backyard was our sanctuary, a small space with a chair, a dog bed for Max, and a view of the sky. I tied a service ribbon to his collar, a little piece of my past to honor our bond, and the neighborhood loved him as much as I did. Kids would wave as they rode their bikes, shouting, "Hi, Max," and neighbors would stop to pet him, their smiles warm. They knew I was a vet, knew I'd been through hell, and they respected my space. I thought I'd finally found some peace, until that September evening in 2024, when everything turned upside down. I was tossing a tennis ball for Max, his joyful barks filling the air as he bounded after it, when a gray SUV pulled into my driveway. I saw the logo on the doors, Desert Sands HOA, and my stomach dropped. 3 people got out, all wearing black vests with HOA compliance in bold letters. The leader, a guy in his 50s named Richard Hayes, carried a clipboard, his face hard as he walked up to my backyard gate. "Mr. Rivera, your dog is in violation of Desert Sands HOA regulations," he said, shoving a letter at me, the paper stamped with a logo that looked official but felt wrong. "He's a dangerous animal, unregistered, unleashed, and a noise nuisance. You owe a $4,000 fine, payable in 72 hours, or we'll have him removed." My heart started racing, my PTSD kicking in hard. Richard's aggressive tone, the way he pointed at Max, it was like a grenade going off in my head. My hands shook as I took the letter, my vision blurring as a flashback tried to pull me under. Sand, smoke, the sound of gunfire. Max dropped the ball and pressed against my leg, his warmth steadying me, keeping me in the present. "Max isn't dangerous," I said, my voice low, trying to stay calm even as my chest tightened. "He's a therapy dog. I have his certification. And there's no HOA here. I've lived in this house for 10 years, and we've never had one." Richard smirked, his eyes cold. "Desert Sands HOA was established last month," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "You're under our jurisdiction now. Pay the fine, or we'll be back to take the dog." The woman with him, a 40-year-old named Linda, started snapping photos of Max with her phone, the flash making him flinch. The other guy, a burly man named Greg, rattled my gate, and Max barked once, a protective sound that Greg jumped on. "See? Aggressive," he said, pointing at Max like he was some kind of threat. My anger surged, but my PTSD was screaming. I couldn't think straight, couldn't fight back the way I wanted to. At 50, I'm not as quick as I used to be, and the years of trauma weighed heavy. "Get off my property," I growled, gripping Max's collar to keep myself grounded, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and fear. They laughed, a cruel sound that cut through me, and Richard said, "You've got 72 hours, veteran," before they got back in their SUV and drove off. I sank into my chair, the letter crumpled in my hand, my breath coming in short gasps. Max climbed onto my lap, his weight a comfort as I buried my face in his fur, tears burning my eyes. I couldn't lose him. He was the only thing keeping me sane. The only thing keeping me here after 15 years of battling my demons. "They're not taking you," I whispered, my voice a vow, my hands trembling as I held him close. I didn't know how to fight this, didn't know if I had the strength at my age, but I knew I had to try. That night, I walked over to my neighbor's house, my hands still shaking as I knocked on the door. Dr. Elena Martinez answered, her face kind but concerned, and I handed her the letter, my voice breaking. "Elena, they're trying to take Max," I said. "I can't lose him. I need your help." Elena took the letter, her eyes scanning it, her expression shifting from concern to determination. "This isn't a real HOA, Tom," she said, her voice calm but firm, the kind of tone that made me trust her instantly. I've seen scams like this. They target people like you, thinking you won't fight back. We're going to fight this, and Max isn't going anywhere. For the first time that day, I felt a flicker of hope, Max's tail thumping softly at my feet. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew I wasn't alone. I've never been good at asking for help. It's not the Army way, and at 50, I've spent too many years trying to handle things on my own. But that night, standing on Elena's doorstep, I didn't have a choice. Max was everything to me, and the thought of losing him was more terrifying than any firefight I'd faced in Afghanistan. Elena Martinez, my neighbor, is a therapist who specializes in PTSD, and over the past year, we've become friends. She's 38, with a kind smile and a sharp mind, and she'd always checked in on me, knowing the signs of what I was going through. When she opened the door and saw the letter in my hand, her face softened, but I could see the fire in her eyes as she read it. "We're going to fight this, Tom," she said, her voice steady, and for the first time since Richard showed up, I felt like I could breathe. Elena got to work right away, her focus like a soldier's on a mission. She sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open, while her husband, Carlos, helped me set up security cameras around my backyard. I wasn't sure what good they'd do, but Carlos, a 40-year-old mechanic who'd grown up in the neighborhood, insisted. "We're catching these guys in the act," he said, his voice gruff, his hands steady as he mounted the cameras in the desert plants. Elena found out that Desert Sands HOA wasn't real. Their domain was registered just 6 weeks ago to a shell company called Oasis Holdings LLC, tied to a developer named Sunwest Properties. "They're trying to force you out," she told me, her voice tight. "Your house is on a corner lot, perfect for their next strip mall." I clenched my fists, my anger flaring, but my PTSD made it hard to focus. Max stayed close, his head on my knee, his presence keeping me grounded. Elena called a friend of hers, Officer Miguel Torres, a 42-year-old Tucson cop who'd worked with her on veterans programs. "Miguel, we've got a fake HOA targeting Tom," she said, sending him the letter and her research. I listened as Miguel agreed to set up a sting, his voice serious. "If they come back, we'll be ready," he said. Elena also reached out to a colleague, Dr. James Carter, a psychiatrist who knew about therapy dogs and PTSD. She asked him for a statement on how important Max was to me, and I'll never forget what he wrote. "Max is critical to Tom's stability." Those words hit me hard. At 50, I'd been through enough to know how fragile my stability was, and Max was the only thing holding it together. The next day, Elena called a neighborhood meeting at her house, and I was nervous as hell. I'm not good with crowds, even small ones, but I knew I had to be there for Max. About a dozen neighbors showed up, people I'd nodded to over the years but never really talked to. Elena stood at the front of her living room, her laptop projecting her research, her voice calm but commanding. "These people aren't a real HOA," she said, pointing to the shell company's records. "They're scammers, targeting Tom because they think he won't fight back. But we're not letting them take Max or intimidate anyone else." The neighbors nodded, their faces a mix of anger and resolve, and Mrs. Lopez, a 60-year-old grandmother from across the street, spoke up. "Max is part of this community," she said, her voice firm. "We'll stand with Tom." I felt a lump in my throat, my chest tight with gratitude. I wasn't used to this kind of support, but it meant everything. On the third day, as the 72-hour deadline loomed, Elena and I were ready, or at least, she was. I sat on my patio, Max at my feet, the cameras hidden in the plants, their lenses trained on the gate. I was a mess, my PTSD making every noise feel like a threat, my hands shaking as I scratched Max's ears. Elena stood nearby, her phone in hand, her calm a stark contrast to my nerves. "They'll come," she told me, her voice steady, and I nodded, trying to believe her. "Thank you, Elena," I said, my voice rough, the words heavy with everything I couldn't say. At 50, I'd seen enough to know I couldn't do this alone, and having her by my side gave me the strength I didn't have on my own. The gray SUV pulled into my driveway just after noon, and my heart rate spiked, my PTSD flaring as Richard, Linda, and Greg stepped out, their expressions smug. Richard banged on the gate, his voice booming. "Time's up, Rivera," he shouted. "Pay the $4,000, or we're taking the dog, starting now." Greg pulled out a pair of bolt cutters, moving toward the gate like he was going to break in, and Linda started taking more photos, her camera flashing. I froze, my mind screaming. But Elena stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. "You're on camera," she said, pointing to the plants where the cameras were hidden. "And I know you're not a real HOA. Oasis Holdings, Sunwest Properties. We've got your whole operation figured out. You're scammers, and you're not touching Max." Richard's smirk faltered, and I saw the uncertainty in his eyes, but I was still shaking, Max pressing against me, his warmth keeping me from spiraling. Then Officer Torres and his team moved in, sirens blaring as 2 police cars surrounded the SUV. "Tucson PD," Miguel shouted, his badge out. "You're under arrest for extortion, attempted theft, and impersonating an HOA." The neighbors came out of their houses, cheering, their phones out, recording the scene. Richard, Linda, and Greg were handcuffed, their smug looks gone, and I stood there, my arms around Max, tears streaming down my face. Elena put her hand on my shoulder, her voice soft. "We did it, Tom. Max is safe." I nodded, my chest heaving, the relief so overwhelming I could barely speak. At 50, I'd faced a lot of battles, but this one I didn't have to fight alone. Watching Richard, Linda, and Greg get handcuffed felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders, but I knew the fight wasn't over. I stood there in my backyard, Max pressed against my legs, his tail wagging softly as the police led the scammers away. The neighbors were cheering, their voices a blur, but I was still shaking, my PTSD making it hard to process everything. At 50, I've learned to live with the way my mind works, but moments like this, high stress, loud noises, confrontation, they bring me right back to the war. Elena stayed close, her hand on my shoulder, her calm grounding me as much as Max did. "We've got them, Tom," she said, her voice steady, and I nodded, trying to believe it. The footage from the cameras Carlos had set up was a game changer. Officer Torres told us it showed everything. Greg trying to break into my yard with bolt cutters, Richard's threats, Linda taking photos like she was building a case against Max. Elena's research gave the police a roadmap. She'd linked Desert Sands HOA to a shell company called Oasis Holdings LLC, which was tied to a developer named Sunwest Properties. A few days later, the Tucson PD raided Sunwest's office in Phoenix, and what they found made my blood boil. They'd been extorting people like me for over $60,000, targeting homeowners across Tucson to clear land for a strip mall. The guy behind it, Paul Carter, was a 55-year-old with a rap sheet for fraud, and Sunwest was in on it, taking a cut of the profits. My house, on a corner lot, was just another target for their greed. What happened next caught me off guard. Mrs. Lopez, the grandmother across the street, had live-streamed the whole confrontation on Facebook, and it went viral, 5 million views in a day. People started sharing it everywhere, with hashtags like #SaveMax and #VeteransRights. I saw the comments pouring in. "This is heartbreaking. Max is a hero. Fake HOAs need to be stopped." I wasn't used to that kind of attention. At 50, I'm more comfortable in the shadows. But seeing people rally around Max, around me, it hit me hard. KWLD News 13 came to my house for an interview, and I sat on my patio, Max at my feet, his service ribbon gleaming. "Max saved my life," I told them, my voice cracking. "They tried to take him from me, but Elena and this community fought for us." I didn't say much. I'm not good with words. But Elena spoke up, her voice strong, explaining how these scammers targeted veterans like me. The viral video brought other victims out of the woodwork. Over a dozen people in Tucson came forward, sharing stories like mine. A widow who'd paid $2,000 to save her garden. A family forced to sell their home after fake fines for their kid's swing set. Elena organized a meeting at her house, and I went, even though crowds still made me jumpy. Max stayed by my side, his head on my knee as I listened to their stories, my heart aching for them. "They thought they could intimidate us," Elena said, her voice strong, and I nodded, feeling a fire I hadn't felt in years. At 50, I'd spent too long feeling broken, but this was worth fighting for. Elena connected with a veterans group called Veterans United, and they turned Max's story into a campaign called Protect Our Heroes. I wasn't sure how I felt about being the face of it, but seeing veterans across the country share their own stories about therapy dogs, using #ProtectOurHeroes, made me realize how much this mattered. A GoFundMe they started raised $20,000 to help with legal fees, and I saw messages from people as far away as New York and Texas. My therapy dog got me through my darkest days, wrote a Marine vet from Texas, and I felt a connection I hadn't felt since my Army days. Elena's colleague, Dr. James Carter, gave a statement to the media about how important therapy dogs are for PTSD, and when NBC News picked it up, I saw my story on national TV. These scammers targeted Tom because they thought he wouldn't fight back, Elena said, Max wagging his tail beside her. I watched, my chest tight, grateful for her strength. Every evening, I'd sit on my patio with Max, watching the sunset, trying to make sense of it all. My neighbors started showing up, bringing coffee, sharing stories, their support a lifeline I didn't know I needed. Elena would join us sometimes, her kids playing nearby, their laughter a reminder of what I'd fought for in the war. We're not done yet, she told me one night, her voice soft but determined. This is bigger than Tucson. We're taking this fight as far as it needs to go. I nodded, my hand on Max's head, his steady presence a reminder of why we were doing this. At 50, I'd been through enough battles to know this one wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. The weeks after the arrests were a blur, but I could feel the momentum building. The Tucson PD worked with the FBI, thanks to Veterans United pushing the case higher, and they raided SunWest Properties headquarters in Phoenix. What they found made me sick. Paul Carter, the guy behind the scam, had extorted over $100,000 from people across Arizona, and SunWest was in on it, using the money to fund their strip mall project. The FBI found evidence of the same scam in Nevada and New Mexico, and they hit them with a federal indictment for racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Knowing they'd targeted so many people, not just me, made my blood boil, but it also made me more determined to see this through. My story, and Max's, went national, and I wasn't ready for that kind of spotlight. At 50, I'm used to keeping my head down, but the viral Facebook video, the news segments on CNN and ABC News, they made that impossible. Headlines like, "Veteran Fights Fake HOA to Save Therapy Dog," were everywhere, and Elena got invited to speak at a mental health conference in Phoenix. She asked me to come, but I couldn't handle the crowd. I sent her a photo of me and Max instead, and she used it in her talk. "Therapy dogs are lifelines for veterans with PTSD," she said, her voice echoing through the hall, and I heard later that the audience gave her a standing ovation. I was proud of her, even if I couldn't be there. Back home, my backyard became a gathering place for the community. Veterans groups started showing up, bringing their therapy dogs to meet Max, and I'd sit there, watching the dogs play, listening to stories from guys who'd been through the same hell I had. It was healing in a way I didn't expect. At 50, I thought I'd never find that kind of connection again. Some local kids started a Paws for Heroes project, making cards for veterans with therapy dogs, and one day, a 7-year-old named Mia handed me a card with a drawing of Max. "Max is a superhero," she said, her voice full of awe, and I smiled, my first real smile in weeks. Those kids raised $3,000 for a therapy dog program, and I felt a pride I hadn't felt since my Army days. The trial against Paul Carter was tough. I had to testify, and I wasn't sure I could do it. Crowds, bright lights, people staring. It's a nightmare for someone with PTSD. But Elena was there, sitting in the front row, her calm giving me strength. I took the stand, my voice shaking at first, Max's service ribbon pinned to my jacket. "They threatened to take Max, knowing he was a therapy dog," I said, my eyes on Paul, who wouldn't meet my gaze. "They preyed on me because they thought I was weak, but they didn't know my community." The prosecution played the footage from my cameras, and I watched the jury's faces as they saw Greg with the bolt cutters, Richard's threats filling the room. It was over in 3 days. Paul got 12 years in prison, and Richard, Linda, and Greg took plea deals, getting 4 years each in order to pay restitution. SunWest settled a civil lawsuit for $3 million, and I got a share of it. I didn't want the money for myself. At 50, I don't need much, so I started the Max Rivera Healing Fund to help other veterans get therapy dogs. At the launch, I cut the ribbon, Max barking happily beside me, and we gave our first grant, a $2,000 stipend, to a young vet in Phoenix for his dog's training. "Thank you, Tom," he said, shaking my hand, and I saw myself in his eyes, the same struggle, the same hope. The trial's aftermath was bigger than I expected. SunWest got a $5 million fine, and the FBI's investigation led to arrests in other states. Arizona passed Max's law, making it a felony to impersonate an HOA with intent to defraud, with protections for veterans like me. Seeing my name, and Max's, on that law felt surreal, but it meant we'd made a difference. Every evening, I'd sit on my patio with Max, watching the sunset, feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. My neighbors became my family, their support a lifeline I never thought I'd have. At 50, I'd spent too long feeling alone, but now, I knew I wasn't. Max had saved me, and this community had saved us both. 5 years have passed since that day in 2024, and I'm 55 now, but my backyard still feels like a sanctuary, maybe even more so. Max is 9 years old, his muzzle a little grayer, but his eyes are as gentle as ever, his tail still wagging when I sit on the patio to watch the sunset. I added a plaque near his dog bed a few years back, engraved with the words, "In honor of Max, a veteran's lifeline." It's become a place where people come to reflect, veterans, families, even kids, leaving flowers or just sitting for a while, petting Max as they share their stories. I never thought my little backyard would mean so much to so many, but it does, and that fills me with a quiet pride. The fight we went through inspired something bigger than I ever imagined. The American Psychological Association started a campaign called Therapy Dogs Matter, using Max's story to push for stronger protections for therapy animals. They made flyers with tips on spotting fake HOAs, and I saw Max's picture on them, his service ribbon shining. Tom Rivera fought for a veteran's healing, the campaign said, and I felt a swell of emotion every time I heard that. Max's law became a model for new laws in 6 states, protecting veterans and people with disabilities from scams like the one I faced. Advocacy groups for veterans got involved too, making sure mental health support wasn't overlooked, and I'm proud to know Max and I had a part in that. My neighborhood became a family after everything we went through. They started a Pause for Healing Day, where they'd come over to tend my backyard, planting new desert flowers, cleaning the plaque, playing with Max. The kids who'd made those cards years ago started a podcast called Pause for Heroes, interviewing veterans with therapy dogs across Arizona, and I listened to the first episode, hearing a girl named Mia say, "Tom and Elena showed us the power of standing up." At 55, I never thought I'd be an inspiration, but hearing that made me smile, Max's head on my knee as I listened. On the 5th anniversary of the incident, I held a ceremony in my backyard, inviting the whole community, Elena and her family, Officer Torres, other veterans with their therapy dogs. Over 100 people showed up, Max at the center, his tail wagging as kids pet him. We unveiled a new bench beside the plaque, a gift from Veterans United, with a plaque that read, "In honor of Tom and Elena, champions of healing." I stood up to speak, my voice thicker than I expected. "Max gave me my life back," I said, looking out at the crowd, many of them saluting, their eyes shining. "And this community made sure he stayed. Thank you for fighting with me." They cheered, Max barked, and I felt a peace I hadn't known in decades. As the sun set that evening, I sat on the bench, Max lying beside me, watching the families around the plaque, their voices a soft hum of gratitude. Elena sat with me, her kids playing nearby, and we talked about everything that had happened, the fear, the fight, the victory. At 55, I've lived through more battles than most, but this one taught me something new. I don't have to fight alone. "We kept our promise, Max," I whispered, scratching his ears, the plaque glowing in the fading light. My backyard, once just a place to survive, had become a place to heal. For me, for Max, for everyone who needed it. I'm Tom Rivera, and this is my backyard, a place of healing, thanks to Max, my therapy dog, and the community that fought for us. 5 years ago, fake HOA cops tried to take Max away, fining me $4,000 and calling him dangerous. I was 50 then, battling PTSD, and I didn't know if I could fight back. But Dr. Elena Martinez stepped in, exposed their scam, and inspired Max's law to protect veterans like me. Now, at 55, I'm here with Max, and this backyard is a legacy of justice and love. This is my story on HOA Karen Files, where we shine a light on the brave who refuse to back down. Have you been targeted by a fake HOA? Tell me in the comments. I'll read every one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next story. Thanks for listening. And let's keep honoring those who heal us.